Welcome to our channel. Hollywood Movie Review. Mission: Impossible, Fallout 2018 Movie Review. Mission: Impossible, Fallout is a 2018 American action spy film written and directed by Christopher McQuarrie. It is the sequel to Mission: Impossible, Rogue Nation, 2015, and the sixth installment in the Mission: Impossible film series. The ensemble cast includes Tom Cruise, Henry Cavill, Ving Rhames, Simon Pegg, Rebecca Ferguson, Sean Harris, Angela Bassett, Vanessa Kirby, Michelle Monaghan, and Alec Baldwin. Set 2 years after the events of Rogue Nation, Fallout follows Impossible Missions Force agent Ethan Hunt, Cruise, and his team in their efforts to prevent a nuclear attack by terrorists Solomon Lane, Harris, and the mysterious extremist John Lark. Work on a sequel to Rogue Nation commenced before its 2015 release. The series' first returning director, McQuarrie intended for Fallout to better explore Ethan's character and emotions, believing previous entries had left him primarily a cipher for audiences, and to test the limits of Ethan's abilities, morality, and personal relationships. The script was brief, only 33 pages, serving as an outline driven primarily by the interesting filming locations and allowing for improvisation and significant changes to scenes throughout filming. Principal photography began in April 2017, on a $178 to $180 million budget, in Paris, continuing on to London, New Zealand, Norway, and the United Arab Emirates by early 2018. Filming was delayed for several months after Cruise broke his ankle during a stunt, significantly inflating the budget while the production waited for his return, but also providing McQuarrie the opportunity to further develop unfinished scenes in the script. Mission: Impossible, Fallout premiered in Paris on July 12, 2018, and was theatrically released in the United States on July 27. The film garnered universal acclaim, particularly for its standout set pieces, and received several awards. It also broke box office records for the series and grossed $791.1 million worldwide, making it the highest-grossing film in the Mission: Impossible series and the 8th highest-grossing film of 2018. Fallout was followed by 2 sequels, Mission: Impossible, Dead Reckoning Part 1I, 2023, and Mission: Impossible, The Final Reckoning, 2025. 2 years after the capture of rogue British agent Solomon Lane to his terrorist network, the Syndicate has reorganized as the Apostles, a terror-for-hire group. They are recruited by extremist John Lark to acquire 3 plutonium cores for nuclear bombs he will use to dismantle the existing world order. Impossible Missions Force, IMF, agent Ethan Hunt fails to recover the cores in Berlin after the Apostles take his teammate Luther Stickle hostage. Ethan chooses to save Luther, allowing the Apostles to steal the cores. Ethan, Luther, and teammate Benji Dunn capture Lark's nuclear weapons specialist, Nils Delbruck, and trick him into providing schematics for Lark's bombs. Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, Director Erica Sloan confronts Ethan and IMF Secretary Alan Hunley over the team's failure to recover the plutonium. She insists on sending her agent, August Walker, with them to find the cores, directing him to consider anyone expendable. Ethan and Walker perform a halo jump above Paris and infiltrate a nightclub where Lark is to purchase the cores from arms broker Alana Mitsopoulos. They approach a man who they believe to be Lark, but after an intense fight in the men's restroom, Ethan's ally MI6 agent, Ilsa Faust, intervenes and kills the man to save Ethan. Assuming Lark's identity, Ethan meets Mitsopoulos, who gives him 1 core, explaining that the Apostles will deliver the others after he attacks a police convoy and liberates its prisoner, Lane. Meanwhile, Walker gives Sloan evidence suggesting Ethan is the real Lark. Ethan deviates from the plan and rams the truck carrying Lane into the Seine to protect its police escort from Mitsopoulos' mercenaries. He leads the police away while Benji and Luther secure Lane and thwarts an assassination attempt on Lane by Ilsa. Meeting with Ethan, Ilsa explains that MI6 assigned her to kill Lane to prevent foreign governments from interrogating him and prove her loyalty after working undercover as a syndicate agent. 2. She was ordered to protect Lark and ensure Lane's escape, but disobeyed to protect Ethan. The team brings Lane to London for the exchange, but Hunley confronts them with Walker's evidence. The team tricks Walker into admitting he is Lark, and Sloan sends a CIA unit to arrest them all. However, the Apostles intervene, and in the ensuing gunfight, Walker kills Hunley and escapes alongside Lane. Ethan gives chase until Walker reveals he has located Julia, Ethan's ex-wife, who was sent into hiding to protect her from his enemies 3 and threatens her life. Walker is unable to kill Ethan, as Lane is withholding the remaining cores until he can take revenge on Ethan. Ethan, Benji, Luther, and Ilsa track Lane and Walker to a medical camp near the Siachen Glacier in Kashmir, treating a smallpox outbreak orchestrated by the Apostles. Ilsa deduces that Lane will use the bombs to irradiate the water supplies of bordering India, Pakistan, and China, threatening billions of people. Benji explains the bombs operate as a circuit, meaning defusing one bomb will trigger the other unless the detonator is first disabled. At the camp, Ethan discovers Julia and her new husband are leading the medical team at the request of an anonymous donor, implied to be Walker. The bomb countdown is started, and Walker leaves with the detonator by helicopter, while Lane remains behind to die. Luther and Julia work together to defuse one bomb, while Ilsa and Benji subdue Lane and begin defusing the second. Meanwhile, Ethan hijacks a helicopter and crashes it into Walker's, causing both helicopters to crash on a cliff, leaving one suspended over the edge by its cargo hook. Ethan releases the hook, which impales and kills Walker, before disarming the detonator. The wounded Ethan is recovered to the medical camp by Sloan, who has Lane returned to MI6, freeing Ilsa. Ethan apologizes to Julia for the perils he has put her in, but she expresses gratitude for his efforts to safeguard the world and her new life. Ilsa and Ethan share a moment together as narration by Sloan praises him for caring about every individual life. A sixth entry in the Mission: Impossible film series based on the 1966 TV series of the same name began development shortly before the successful release of the fifth entry, Mission: Impossible, Rogue Nation, in July 2015. That month, the series' lead actor Tom Cruise announced that filming was planned to begin by August 2016, as production studios Paramount Pictures and Skydance Media wanted a quick turnaround on the sequel. In November, Christopher McQuarrie, writer and director for Rogue Nation, confirmed he would return to both roles, marking the first time in the series that a director would lead more than one installment. McQuarrie was initially reluctant to return, having found filming of Rogue Nation difficult, partly because of the complicated stunt sequences and the expectations to exceed those segments in a sequel. He was also conscious that fans had come to expect a different director with each installment. Cruise, however, wanted McQuarrie to lead the sequel. McQuarrie, Cruise, via his TC Productions company, J.J. Abrams, via Bad Robot, and Jake Myers served as Fallout's producers. Skydance executives David Ellison, Don Granger, and Dana Goldberg were executive producers. Paramount Pictures and Skydance Media provided the film's finance. Chinese film company Alibaba Pictures provided investment financing in exchange for serving as a local marketing partner in China. McQuarrie wrote the screenplay for Mission: Impossible, Fallout but collaborated with Cruise on developing the narrative. Cruise was particularly interested in resolving the long-running narrative between Ethan and his wife Julia, Michelle Monaghan, which began in Mission: Impossible 3, 2006, and had received an ambiguous resolution in the fourth film, Mission: Impossible, Ghost Protocol, 2011. Fans often asked Cruise about Julia's fate and he wanted to provide them with closure which could also serve as Fallout's primary emotional narrative arc. Cruise and McQuarrie agreed in their early conversations that the film should end with Julia and Ethan completing their story together. McQuarrie aimed to delve deeper into Ethan's emotions and motivations to foster a stronger emotional connection with the audience. He noted that in previous films, Ethan was somewhat enigmatic, leaving viewers to guess his thoughts. McQuarrie wanted to change that by clearly revealing Ethan's deepest fears and thoughts. As part of this, the original primary narrative involved Ethan assuming Lark's identity for most of the film, forcing him to portray a villainous alter ego and face moral quandaries, tasking him with performing horrible things to preserve the greater good. Cruise supported the idea, and it remained part of the script for some time until McQuarrie determined it made Fallout too long, sacrificed action for intellectualism, reduced focus on the supporting characters, and prevented him from including many of the traditional elements fans expected from the Mission Impossible series. Several abandoned ideas from Rogue Nation were resurrected for Fallout, including Lane challenging Ethan by asking, "Your mission, should you choose to accept it, did you ever choose not to?" and a motorcade sequence involving Lane which evolved into the Paris heist. McQuarrie and Cruise had discussed wanting to break Lane out of prison in a sequel. The mousetrap sequence, in which Ethan, Luther, and Benji tricked Delbruck into revealing details of Lark's bombs, was also intended for Rogue Nation, but McQuarrie could not make it work within that film's narrative. He wanted the audience to experience what would happen if the antagonist actually won and how Ethan would feel in response. A central character was to be killed off during the opening scene of Ethan attempting to purchase the plutonium cores, but McQuarrie did not want to kill Luther or Benji as he did not believe the rest of the film could recover from those deaths. He chose to kill William Brandt, portrayed by Jeremy Renner in Ghost Protocol and Rogue Nation, but the actor declined to return. McQuarrie wrote with a self-imposed rule that the female characters could not be helpless, which initially made it challenging to place them in difficult situations, like having Ilsa captured by Lane. Eventually, he justified it by ensuring she frees herself without help from a man. According to The Hollywood Reporter, unspecified issues with the script risked derailing the project altogether in July 2016, delaying the start of filming from November 2016 to January 2017. The final script was only 33 pages long. McQuarrie felt this worked for Mission Impossible films, where a broad outline for locations, sets, and actors is provided, but scenes are adjusted, added, or removed based on how events unfold during filming. He was primarily focused on finding interesting locations to create a great-looking spy movie. Fallout features Cruise, Baldwin, Harris, Ferguson, Pegg, and Rhames reprising their roles from previous Mission Impossible films. A dispute over Cruise's pay in August 2016 further stalled pre-production, and though resolved by September, it caused several months of further delay in filming from January 2017. Cruise wanted to be paid more than the $11 to $13 million he received for The Mummy, 2017, as well as receiving gross points, a percentage of the initial box office gross received by Paramount and Skydance before any disbursements to the other financial partners are paid. Michelle Monaghan was confirmed to join the cast in June 2017, reprising her role as Julia for the first time in 7 years. Ferguson's Rogue Nation contract included an option clause that allowed the studio to commit her to reprise her role as Ilsa Faust in a sequel. She enjoyed portraying a strong woman and embraced performing her own stunts when possible. While concurrently filming scenes for The Kid Who Would Be King, 2019, Ferguson was pregnant during early filming of Fallout. Sean Harris had initially wanted the Solomon Lane character to die in Rogue Nation but returned for Fallout, becoming the series' first recurring villain. McQuarrie and Cruise had determined that killing Lane was not the right choice for Rogue Nation as they already had future ideas for him. Alec Baldwin agreed to reprise his role as Alan Hunley on the condition that the character be killed off. Renner declined to reprise his role as William Brandt, in part because he was committed to filming Avengers: Infinity War, 2018, although he ultimately did not appear in that film, but he had also been displeased with the frequent script changes in the previous films that interfered with his spending time with his family. Fallout introduces Vanessa Kirby as Alana Mitsopoulos, the White Widow. The character, alongside her brother Zola, are the children of Max, an arms dealer from the original film, Mission Impossible, 1996. Kirby followed a strict exercise regimen to prepare for performing some of her own stunts and regularly ran with a personal trainer. Kirby was concurrently filming the Netflix series The Crown, which required her to film during the day in London before traveling by Eurostar train to Paris for Fallout. Cavill joined the cast in March 2017. He suggested Walker's mustache and stubble aesthetic, and McQuarrie rewrote the character to better match Cavill's dry sense of humor. An unnamed well-known actor was originally set to play the decoy John Lark as a surprise cameo, but in preliminary tests, he was unable to keep pace with Cruise and Cavill during a fight scene between their three characters in a Parisian bathroom. As such, the actor was replaced with stuntman Liang Yang. The police officer encountered on the street by the IMF team was written as a man, but Cruise recommended swapping the gender as he felt a woman, Alex Benazik, would make the scene more emotionally impactful. Actor Sian Brooke was also cast in an undisclosed role that was cut from the finished film. Principal photography began on April 8, 2017, in Paris, France. Fallout was primarily photographed on 35mm movie film using Kodak analog film stock and Panavision Millennium XL cameras, which were lightweight and easily switched between handheld and Steadicam modes. Aerial scenes were filmed digitally using Panavision DXL cameras because cinematographer Rob Hardy considered it impractical to repeatedly land the aircraft to reload the film stock. The helicopter carrying the imprisoned Lane was filmed atop the Paris Ministry of Finance. The helicopter weighed 14,000 kilograms, but the helipad was only rated to hold 4, so the pilot hovered the craft imperceptibly above the pad's surface. As the sequence moves under a bridge along the Seine, the area was draped with 300 feet 91 meters of silk to conceal events from onlookers and paparazzi, and the guns used were silent with gunfire being added in post-production. As Ethan and Walker escape in a truck, different parts of the sequence were filmed alternately in clear and rainy weather, but McQuarrie did not believe viewers would notice. Fallout was also filmed at the Trocadero and Palais Royal. In late May, the production moved to New Zealand for 6 to 8 weeks, primarily to film Fallout's final act, the opening nightmare wedding sequence, filmed at Milford Sound, between Julia and Ethan, was among the first scenes filmed to accommodate Monahan's conflicting schedule on the path, 2015 to 2018. Baldwin was intended but unavailable to portray the minister and was replaced by Harris. There was only an hour on a specific day to film the scene, but the typical clement weather had turned cloudy and cold, making the actor's breath visible. McQuarrie decided this worked for the nightmare sequence, as the warm-looking background contrasting with the visible breath signaled to the audience that something was wrong from the start. McQuarrie wanted a warmer visual color tone for Fallout to visually convey it as a major summer film, but the delayed production meant scenes would be filmed in locations during the winter. He only wanted the scene of Ethan waking up following the nightmare to appear cold to represent Ethan's lonely existence. Hardy found this cliché, so he made the set look cold while lighting it warmly. Because the abandoned building used for filming was already cold, Cruise was surrounded by heaters that gave him a red glow. The Kashmir sequences were filmed in Queenstown. India was extensively scouted to film Kashmir scenes there because McQuarrie wanted Fallout to have a more political narrative, but he could not secure permission to film there. For the camp scenes, Julia was scripted to have a baby, but McQuarrie opted to remove this only 2 days before her scenes were filmed. There were only 5 hours of daylight for each filming day, so the set was arranged to give Monahan the best natural light for her character's reveal. The schedule only allowed Cruise 8 minutes to film his side of the conversation between Ethan and Julia. In Fallout's final scene, Ferguson improvised Ilsa whispering something unintelligible to Julia. The film ends with a shot of Ethan in a medical bed. The planned ending was longer, but the camera ran out of film, and the resulting flash of white was used as a transition to the credits. Cruise was reluctant to end Fallout this way, but McQuarrie felt the film was already too long and the improvised ending fitting. The production relocated to London in early July, filming in locations such as Blackfriars Bridge and Tate Modern. Cavill's mustache became a source of conflict when he needed to reprise his role as Superman for reshoots of Justice League, 2017, and had to be clean-shaven. McQuarrie, unwilling to let Cavill shave unless compensated, requested $3 million from the Justice League production to cover the costs of digitally re-adding Cavill's facial hair back for Fallout until it regrew. Paramount eventually intervened and refused permission altogether, necessitating the mustache to be digitally removed for Justice League. In August, Cruise broke his right ankle after colliding with a wall during a stunt jump between buildings for a foot pursuit scene. Cruise completed the scene and moved off camera before acknowledging his injury. The footage was used in Fallout. Production was expected to shut down for 2 to 3 months while Cruise recovered. McQuarrie used the hiatus to improve underdeveloped scenes around the pursuit as they lacked compelling drama. Some filming locations had not yet been secured, such as St. Paul's Cathedral, and Benji's interactions with Ethan were still being determined. Editor Eddie Hamilton and his team also began processing existing footage to save time later. Cruise focused on rehabilitation due to concerns that too long a delay would force Fallout to miss its planned July 27, 2018, release date. He was not fully recovered when he returned to filming in October, after 7 to 8 weeks. He filmed several scenes with his injured ankle, including completing the foot pursuit, the meeting in London between the IMF. The scene takes place around a table so that Cruise and Baldwin, who was awaiting double hip replacement surgery, could lean on it for relief, and the climactic clifftop battle between Ethan and Walker on Pulpit Rock, Norway, filmed in November. The limited script outline allowed for many scenes to be added, developed, or removed throughout filming. The initial meeting between Ethan and Walker was reshot because Walker's role had evolved throughout filming. Similarly, a planned confrontation between Ilsa and Alana was removed because of the well-received chemistry between Cruise and Kirby during a riverside dialogue scene. The scene, in which Ethan is gifted one of the cores by Alana, was added only days before it was filmed, as McQuarrie had struggled to explain how only 2 cores remained by the finale. The opening scene, in which the cores are stolen, was reworked to add banter between Cruise and his teammates because the intended suspenseful tone was not making for an interesting scene. Principal photography officially concluded on February 22, 2018. Fallout's approximately 2,000 visual effects shots were supervised by Jody Johnson and developed by DNEG, Blue Bolt, One of Us, Lola, The Third Floor, and Blind. The majority of their work contributed to realizing the 3 main action sequences: the high-altitude low opening, halo, jump, and the Paris and helicopter chases. This also involved cleanup such as concealing cameras and crew reflected in mirrors during the bathroom fight. Other contributions included adding digital cars and backgrounds in some public spaces where the area had been blocked off to avoid paparazzi. The halo jump over Paris was planned over a year and filmed after principal photography. Filming took place in the United Arab Emirates as it was the only area that would legally allow them to perform the stunt. One of the world's largest wind tunnels was built to train for the sequence, and though the facility was also considered for filming, McQuarrie and Cruise found it looked unrealistic. Cruise performed the single-take stunt 106 times, including practice jumps, falling at speeds of 200 to 220 miles per hour, 320 to 350 kilometers per hour, from 25,000 to 30,000 feet, 7,600 to 9,100 m, from a Boeing C-17 Globemaster III accompanied by a camera operator. To prepare for each jump, Cruise inhaled pure oxygen for 20 minutes to avoid decompression sickness. His helmet also provided oxygen and was designed to clearly show his face to enhance the realism. Each jump allowed only 3 minutes of filming per day, as it was filmed close to sunset, allowing just enough light to see the actors clearly. This resulted in 3 successful takes. CGI vapor was added to Cruise's helmet, and DNEG digitally replaced the desert background with a stormy Parisian landscape and inserted the Grand Palais where Ethan lands. Matching the camera movements to the digital backdrop was difficult, requiring 15 tracking artists to make necessary adjustments. The motorbike segment, in which Ethan rides the wrong way against 70 stunt drivers around the Arc de Triomphe, was filmed in 90 minutes early on a Sunday morning when it could be closed due to light traffic. Ethan crashing his motorcycle and being thrown from the vehicle was a practical stunt. The bike was fixed to a hydraulic rig synchronized to the movement of the car with which it collides, while Cruise, attached to a cable, was lifted away at the point of impact. The helicopter pursuit was filmed in Norway and New Zealand. Cruise insisted on filming Ethan's rope climb up to a flying Airbus BK-17 helicopter even though McQuarrie considered it uninteresting. For the following scene in which Ethan commandeers the craft, Cruise earned a pilot's license in 12 days and spent about 18 months training for the stunt. Variations were filmed showing Ethan having either little or no knowledge about flying to provide options in post-production. Cavill leaned out of his own craft in 0 degrees Celsius 32 degrees Fahrenheit winds firing a M249 light machine gun. He received weapons training from McQuarrie's brother, Doug. The helicopter noise prevented Cavill from hearing any instructions, and he improvised much of his performance. The helicopter chase resulted in 70 hours of footage which was edited to just 7.5 minutes. The scene of Ethan's helicopter crashing into walkers was a CGI effect combined with a practical chopper body, designed by Neil Corbould. Ethan's craft was suspended from a wire between two cranes at Hagrid's Hill, Leavesden Studios in England, allowing it to travel 100 feet 30 meters before crashing. The scene was enhanced by DNEG to add snow, extend helicopter blades, and hang Walker's helicopter from the face of Pulpit Rock as a practical model was disallowed due to risks of damaging the rock face. Safety wires and cranes were removed from Cruise and Cavill as their characters fought atop the rock. Walker's facial disfigurement from the crash was suggested by Cruise 5 days before the scene was filmed and involved a prosthetic appliance. McQuarrie considered the theatrical cut to be the definitive version of the film, saying any deleted scenes were those whose inclusion could not be justified. Scenes included Benji, disguised as Lane, expositing to Walker, and Mitsipali's singing in her initial appearance, which McQuarrie believed undermined the tension. Her introductory speech was a combination of existing footage not showing her singing and reshot footage. Scenes of Ilsa and Ethan kissing were filmed, one scripted and one improvised, but McQuarrie felt they weakened her character, removed future potential romantic tension, and interfered with Ethan's unresolved relationship with Julia. A multi-page scripted scene explaining Ilsa's and Ethan's relationship was trimmed to one line, "You should have come with me." Ilsa was also introduced earlier in the Parisian club, but this was changed to her surprise appearance saving Ethan in the club bathroom. A scene of Walker reaching for his gun when confronted by the female French police officer was filmed in post-production to add tension. Hunley's death had not been confirmed when the scene was filmed, but the filmmakers determined it was the correct choice. Cruise suggested his final line, "Go," which Baldwin recorded on his phone at home. Baldwin was also intended to narrate the opening mission briefing, but McQuarrie replaced him because he found Baldwin's voice was too velvety. The what-if scenarios in previous Mission Impossible films visualized how their plans would play out with explanatory narration. However, McQuarrie chose not to include narration in the scene portraying the hypothetical future of Ethan attacking Lane's police convoy and fatally injuring an officer. The absence of narration aimed to keep the audience uncertain about the scene's reality. Shortly after filming concluded, a 170-minute cut was screened for about 70 of the cast's and crew's friends and family at the Soho Hotel, London. Hamilton described a positive reaction tempered with clear improvements that needed to be made. New versions were screened every 2 weeks for American test audiences thereafter. The ending where Lane is given to Mitsipali's was intended as the final scene because Cruise did not want to end with Ethan in a medical bed, but test audiences preferred the latter option. McQuarrie intercut both scenes instead, ending with Ethan. Blood was also added digitally to the decoy Lark's death because the audiences did not find the scene humorous without it. More footage was filmed based on feedback about 7 weeks after principal photography, but feedback was consistent in improving the film's pace. By the fourth screening, McQuarrie and Hamilton reduced the runtime to 147 minutes, which earned the highest audience scores, becoming the theatrical cut. The studio requested further trims to reduce the runtime, but each attempt received lower scores. Permission was secured to play the opening studio logos at double speed to save some time. The final budget for Mission: Impossible Fallout is estimated at $178 to $180 million, with another $150 million allocated for promotion and distribution. The delays caused by Cruise's injury inflated the budget to about $250 to $260 million, including paying to retain the cast and crew in the interim. Most of these costs were repaid by the film's insurance. The Mission: Impossible Fallout score was composed by Lorne Balfe. He was recommended to McQuarrie by Paramount head of music Randy Spendlove, and already had connections with producer Jake Myers as well as Paramount and Skydance. The score was written over 8 to 9 months. Balfe's writing office was adjacent to the editing room, allowing him and McQuarrie to collaborate and experiment with rapid changes in the score to match the edits. McQuarrie only used Balfe's score when reviewing scenes, as he did not like using the standard process of placeholder temp music. The 90-minute score was recorded over 30 days at 2 large London stages, using 300 musicians that included 100 string players, 80 choristers, 42 brass players, 14 drummers, 12 bongo players, and a few woodwind players. Balfe based each piece of the score on the original Mission: Impossible television series theme. He found writing for the mission briefing scene the most difficult because it had to support the tone of the scene without overwhelming the expository dialogue. The title, Mission: Impossible Fallout, was announced in January 2018. About $140 million was spent on the film's global marketing campaign, which focused on behind-the-scenes featurettes promoting the film's depiction of realistic stunt and action sequences instead of CGI. The first trailer debuted during Super Bowl 52 in February 2018, receiving 24.6 million views by July, and the Halo jump scene was promoted at CinemaCon and the 2018 NBA Finals, as well as being shown on YouTube and running before theatrical screenings of every #1 theatrical film for 14 weeks. Paramount published a virtual reality version of the jump on Oculus VR, YouTube's VR channel, and Facebook's Entertainment and 360 Degrees pages. Fallout was also promoted throughout the 2018 FIFA World Cup, and at international airports. Deadline Hollywood reported the film had about 245 million social media impressions across the actors' individual pages, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram, exceeding the typical 168 million for an action-adventure film. Paramount's parent company Viacom promoted Fallout with different content across most of its own global television networks, including a 30-minute making-of special, and Cruise personally promoted the film in markets such as the UK, Tokyo, and Seoul. Fallout also received the most promotional partner funding in the franchise, with $135 million spent worldwide. This included Amazon Prime, BMW, Karcher, Airbus, Shell, LG, M&M's, and Uber, as well as an ESPN promo with James Harden, a Visa screening program/partnership, and an American Ninja Warrior-themed episode. Media analyst Jeff Bach said that, as in 2017, there was a deluge of sequels, but 2018's offerings were ones audiences actually wanted to watch, including Ant-Man and the Wasp, Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom, Mission: Impossible Fallout, and The First Purge. Pre-release estimates suggested Mission: Impossible Fallout would earn $48 to $65 million during its opening weekend in the United States and Canada, and $75 to $80 million from 36 other countries, for a weekend total of $135 million. K-Industry tracking showed 82% of audiences polled were aware of the film, with 42% showing definite interest in it. The premiere of Mission: Impossible Fallout took place at the Palais de Chaillot, in Paris, on July 12, 2018, with a UK premiere the following day. Fallout was released in the United States and Canada on July 27. During its opening weekend, the film grossed $61.2 million from 4,836 theaters, an average of $13,961 per theater, making it the #1 film of the weekend, ahead of Mamma Mia! Here We Go Again, $15.1 million, and The Equalizer 2, $14 million, both in their second weekends. This included $7.5 million from 406 IMAX screen previews, or 12% of the weekend total gross, with a series best $6 million grossed from Thursday night previews, a record later broken by Mission: Impossible – Dead Reckoning Part 1, 2023, with $7 million. The weekend total figure gave Fallout the highest three-day opening in the franchise, ahead of Mission: Impossible 2's $2,057.8 million, and later beaten by Mission: Impossible – The Final Reckoning, 2025, with $64 million. Fallout's opening weekend also represented Cruise's second highest of his career, behind War of the Worlds, 2005, $64.8 million. It retained the #1 position in its second weekend with a gross of $35.3 million, the highest grossing second weekend in the franchise, ahead of the debuts of Christopher Robin, $24.6 million, and The Spy Who Dumped Me, $12.1 million. It fell to the #2 position in its third weekend with a gross of $19.4 million, behind the debut of The Meg, $45.4 million, and ahead of Christopher Robin, $13 million. Although Fallout never reclaimed the #1 position, it remained in the top 10 highest grossing films for a total of 8 weeks, grossing a total of $220.2 million. This made Fallout the 8th highest grossing film of 2018, ahead of Ant-Man and the Wasp, $216.6 million, and behind Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, $232.5 million. Outside of the US and Canada, Fallout overperformed against projections to gross $94.6 million during its opening weekend in 36 countries, including the UK, Russia, Spain, South Korea, Latin America, and most of Asia. This gave a cumulative worldwide gross of $155.8 million, surpassing Rogue Nation's $131.5 million worldwide opening weekend. And Fallout opened at #1 in 29 countries, its highest grosses originating from Korea, $24.9 million, the UK, $9.5 million, India, $8.2 million, Taiwan, $5.4 million, and Mexico, $4.9 million. The film opened in a further 20 countries by the end of August, including China and Japan. In total, Fallout grossed $571 million in these markets, including China, $181.2 million, South Korea, $49.8 million, Japan, $42.4 million, the UK, $31.1 million, France, $27.1 million, Germany, $15.90 million, India, $15.9 million, Taiwan, $14.6 million, Australia, $14.2 million, and Mexico, $11.9 million. Worldwide, Fallout grossed $791.1 million, making it the highest grossing film in the franchise, and the 8th highest grossing film of the year, ahead of Deadpool 2, $734.5 million, and behind Venom, $856.1 million. Those involved with the film and rival studios estimated that Fallout would have to earn $560 to $650 million before it would become profitable. Analysis by Deadline Hollywood suggested that it was not expected to generate a profit until its home media release. This was partly because of those involved who were guaranteed a share of the initial box office gross, including Cruise, Abrams, and Skydance, which reduced the profits returned to Paramount. The film's soundtrack was released digitally and on compact disc in July 2018. Mission: Impossible Fallout was released as a digital download in November 2018, followed in December with 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray, and DVD releases. All versions except the DVD contain special features including audio commentaries by McQuarrie, Cruise, Balfe, and Hamilton, Behind the Fallout, a 7-part documentary covering the film's production and characters, deleted scenes, storyboards, and the film's trailer. Fallout was also released in a collection alongside the 5 previous Mission Impossible films. The soundtrack received a vinyl record release in July 2019. Mission Impossible Fallout received critical praise, and was among the most critically acclaimed films of 2018, with 53 critics placing it among the year's top 10 films. The website Rotten Tomatoes reported that 98% of 444 critics gave the film a positive review, making it the highest-rated Mission Impossible film. The website's consensus reads, "Fast, sleek, and fun, Mission Impossible, Fallout lives up to the impossible part of its name by setting yet another high mark for insane set pieces in a franchise full of them." On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 87 out of 100, based on 60 critics, indicating universal acclaim. Audiences polled by PostTrack gave Fallout an 84% overall positive score with 65% recommending it, and CinemaScore reported filmgoers gave it an average grade of A on an A+ to F scale, the highest response in the franchise. Richard Roeper and Stephanie Zacharek, among others, praised Fallout as one of, if not the best films in the franchise. RoachRebert.com's Brian Tallarico and IndieWire's David Ehrlich described it as one of the best action films ever made, comparing it favorably to Die Hard, 1988, and Mad Max, Fury Road, 2015. The action sequences were praised by critics such as Leonard Maltin and Peter Travers, particularly for the realism provided by Cruise performing his own stunts. Writing for Pop Matters, J.R. Kinnard said the closing action sequence in Kashmir set the new standard for extravagant action sequences, although Michael Phillips considered the violence in the sequence to be excessive. Writing for Salon.com, Matthew Rossa found the narrative predictable but enjoyable. He praised the introspection of the intriguing moral dilemma concerning Hunt's dedication to preserving life and the greater good despite the personal costs to himself. Writing for Time Out, Dan Jolin wrote that McQuarrie returning as director gave Fallout an evolved narrative continuity lacking in previous installments, although Slate's Sam Adams criticized the seemingly improvisational nature of some scenes that left some narrative threads abandoned. In particular, Adams lamented provocative ideas that are posited and ignored, such as the villain's plans to bomb holy cities. Critics such as James Berardinelli and Peter Bradshaw favorably compared the film and the Mission Impossible series to the James Bond film series. USA Today's Brian Truitt and Entertainment Weekly's Chris Nashawati said Fallout's combination of exotic locations, espionage, and action had successfully established the series as the standard for international action-adventure films, and Cruise as the modern James Bond. Cruise's performance was praised by critics such as Maltin and the Chicago Reader's J.R. Jones, with Kinnard, Rossa, and Jolin commending his commitment to performing his own stunts. Reviews suggested that Cruise's stunt work was a significant aspect of the series' appeal. Roper wrote that Cruise successfully embodied Ethan's world-weary cynicism yet unwavering determination to combat those who would harm innocents. Cavill's performance was described as wooden and uninteresting by Kinnard and the Washington Post's and Hornaday, although Hornaday said his physical presence made him a suitable foil for Ethan. Roper wrote that Cavill's performance fit Walker's persona as someone lacking humanity. Phillips and Empire's Helen O'Hara, among others, praised the returning cast of Rhames, Pegg, Baldwin, and Harris, while lamenting the film's focus on Ethan left little room to develop their characters. Zacharek wrote that Pegg and Rhames made Cruise more relatable by association, although Kinnard felt that Pegg's humor and Harris's delightfully wicked portrayal were underused. Ferguson was praised by reviewers such as Screen Daily's Tim Grierson and Berardinelli for her smart, formidable, and captivating performance and palpable romantic chemistry with Cruise. David Adelstein said that she upstaged the other cast as the franchise's standout character. Kirby was also well received by critics such as Kenneth Turan for her captivating and engaging portrayal that provided some of the film's more interesting moments. At the 72nd British Academy Film Awards in 2018, Mission: Impossible – Fallout was nominated for Best Sound. Gilbert Lake, James H. Mather, Christopher Monroe, and Mike Prestwood Smith. 136 for the 44th People's Choice Awards. The film was nominated for Action Movie of 2018 and Movie of 2018, as well as Action Movie Star of 2018 and Male Movie Star of 2018, both Cruise. Fallout won Best Action Movie at the 24th Critics' Choice Awards and was nominated for Best Visual Effects. At the 45th Saturn Awards, Fallout was named Best Action or Adventure Film and was nominated for Best Actor, Cruise, Best Writing, McQuarrie, and Best Special Effects, Andrew Booth, Neil Corbould, Ha-J Evans, and Jody Johnson. The stunt crew were nominated for Outstanding Performance by a Stunt Ensemble in a Motion Picture at the 25th Screen Actors Guild Awards. Jody Johnson and Eddie Hamilton won respective awards for Best Visual Effects and Best Film Editing from the Seattle Film Critics Society. Rob Hardy and Lorne Balfe received separate nominations for Best Cinematography and Best Original Score, and the film received a nomination for Best Picture. The 2019 Location Managers Guild Awards gave awards for Outstanding Locations in Contemporary Films, David Campbell Bell and Ben Piltz, and Outstanding Film Commission, K.J. Jennings, Phil Motago Southland. Fallout delves into Ethan's moral struggles as he grapples with the weight of saving countless lives. Originally, McQuarrie envisioned Ethan adopting the Lark persona for the majority of Fallout, forcing him into morally gray acts to safeguard the greater good. The title Fallout was chosen both to represent the literal nuclear threat and the fallout of Ethan's actions. Critic Matthew Rosser wrote that Fallout challenges Ethan to face the repercussions of his well-intentioned decisions, particularly his unwavering stance against sacrificing innocent lives. His dilemma lies in caring deeply about every individual, both his strength and vulnerability. According to analysis by RogerEbert.com, some characters see Ethan's refusal to sacrifice lives unnecessarily as his greatest asset. However, Ethan regularly gives little value to his own life, entering into one dangerous situation after another. Fallout elucidates that a man like Hunt continuously endangers his life and opts to undertake impossible missions because he possesses the ability to save people and cannot bear the thought of allowing deaths through his own inaction. Critic Peter DeBrugge posited that Ethan's steadfast, heroic persona serves a dual purpose narratively and practically, leveraging Cruise's public image as a moralistic cinema star who portrays characters with a conscience and steadfast convictions. Fallout also explores the toll Ethan's life takes on him and those close to him. DeBrugge observed that Ethan's marriage to Julia falters, partly because she realizes his duty to protect the world outweighs his commitment to her. Critic Nick Allen points out that unlike typical tropes, such as motivating the male protagonist through the death of a loved one, as seen in Casino Royale, 2006, and The Dark Knight, 2008, the Mission: Impossible series, including Fallout, sidesteps this narrative convention. As Fallout concludes, the evolving nature of their relationship is evident, revealing that Julia has forged her own path independently, without waiting for Ethan, symbolizing growth for both characters. Due to Ethan's established connection with Julia, his dynamic with Ilsa remains primarily platonic, allowing Ilsa to be portrayed as a fully developed character distinct from her relationship with Ethan. Ilsa, depicted as Ethan's equal in the world of espionage, possesses the capability to protect herself in perilous situations, relieving Ethan from compromising his career for a romantic relationship. In contrast to Ethan's self-sacrificing nature, his adversaries are indifferent to life, viewing the current world order as corrupt and in need of destruction. Their ideology dictates that great suffering must be inflicted to achieve an even greater peace. Lane's motivations are fueled by a desire for vengeance against Ethan, intending to inflict suffering by placing Julia and Ethan's friends at the center of a potential nuclear explosion. Walker represents the antithesis of Ethan's measured approach, described as a hammer who achieves his objectives regardless of collateral damage. Tallarico reflects on how Fallout prompts a consideration between Ethan's ethical approach and Walker's ruthless efficiency. Film professor Lisa Peirce examined the cultural perceptions of and media interest in Cruz's relatively youthful appearance compared to his age, 56 years old when Fallout was released. His commitment to real stunts and physicality contrasts with the age-related decline typically seen in his aging action star contemporaries. Professor Kelvin K. Gindas considered age to be typically associated with decline and decay, but also representing maturity and personal growth, which, aided by the longevity of the Mission: Impossible series, allowed the Ethan character to evolve over several decades and reshape the representation of the aging hero. Peirce acknowledges Cruz's significant investment in cosmetic products, procedures, and physical conditioning, but argues that his action performances defy stereotypes of aging decline by showcasing physically demanding feats. K. Ginda and Dr. Glenn Donner delve into the resurgence of aging action stars like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, and Bruce Willis, reviving 80s action franchises characterized by simplistic, violence-driven portrayals of hypermasculinity. Ginda observes the evolution in representations of aging heroes, especially Ethan in the Mission: Impossible series. The modern aging hero focuses on social connections, self-sacrifice, and action beyond violence, reshaping the perception of mature heroes. This transformation involves sacrifices such as Ethan's choice to end his relationship with Julia and forego a settled family life, driven by his sense of responsibility to the world. Donner's analysis focuses on how attention is diverted from the spectacle of these stars' once idealized, younger, muscular bodies, with an emphasis on oversized weaponry, fetishized vehicles, and even digital recreations of their younger forms. According to Donner, Cruz never possessed the same hypermuscular form of actors like Schwarzenegger or Stallone, instead presenting a smaller, leaner, and sexualized appearance. As Cruz aged, and his physical appearance could no longer serve as primarily a subject of physical objectification as it had in his youth, discussion shifted to emphasize and celebrate his stunt work. Analysts Rebecca Keegan and Matt Miller, and media educator Brett Lamb, analyzed an early scene in which the IMF tricked Niels Dilbrook into divulging information about Lark's bombs through a fabricated news broadcast, drawing parallels between this fictional scenario and real-world concerns about the rise of fake news. Their analyses reflected contemporary concerns about political attacks on journalism, organized misinformation, declining public trust in media, and the difficulty of distinguishing truth from fiction. Keegan argued that the use of real news figures such as Wolf Blitzer in fictional news broadcasts, while adding an element of realism, blurred the distinction between journalism and entertainment. Deborah Potter, a former network correspondent, and Dolin Tu, a journalism professor, voiced apprehensions regarding the implications of this cameo appearance as of the release of the 8th installment, Mission: Impossible: The Final Reckoning. In 2025, Fallout remains the highest-grossing installment in the series, and is the highest critically rated entry according to aggregated scores by Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic. Among the films in the Mission: Impossible franchise, Fallout is frequently ranked as the best installment, only occasionally ranking second behind Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, or Dead Reckoning. Cavill's August Walker has also been repeatedly listed as among the top 3 Mission: Impossible antagonists, alongside Solomon Lane and Owen Davian, Mission: Impossible 3. A retrospective assessment by Slash Film stated that a protagonist is only as memorable as his antagonist, highlighting Walker as a great villain because of his imposing physicality and charm. McQuarrie mentioned that he received endless grief from fans on social media for killing off Walker. In the years since its release, several publications, such as Esquire, IndieWire, and Time Out, have highlighted Fallout as a standout entry in the action and spy genres. In 2025, it was one of the films voted for the Reader's Choice edition of the New York Times list of the 100 best movies of the 21st century, finishing at number 172. A scene of Cavill pumping or reloading his biceps in preparation during the bathroom fight with the decoy Lark became an internet meme. Cavill improvised the motion to warm up his muscles due to soreness after 3 weeks of filming the scene. When no one remarked on the move, he thought it had looked out of place and did not repeat it until McQuarrie asked him to keep doing it. In 2020, Fallout was among the action films director James Gunn recommended people watch during the COVID-19 pandemic. Cavill would again reference the reloading scene in a cameo appearance as a version of the Marvel Comics character Logan/Wolverine in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU, film Deadpool and Wolverine, 2024. Mission: Impossible, Fallout was followed by Mission: Impossible, Dead Reckoning Part 1, 2023. It features many of the same cast and crew including Cruise, Rhames, Pegg, Ferguson, and Kirby reprising their roles, as well as McQuarrie as director and writer. Dead Reckoning Part 1 also introduces Haley Atwell as an ally to Ethan, and Esai Morales as his old rival who is working for a rogue artificial intelligence known as the Entity. Another sequel, Mission: Impossible, The Final Reckoning, was released in 2025. Though further sequels are planned, Cruise has confirmed that The Final Reckoning would be his final portrayal of Ethan Hunt in the franchise. Anarchist Solomon Lane is behind bars, and his followers are scattered and on the run. So you'd think that Impossible Missions Force operative Ethan Hunt might be due a small vacation for his role in those successes. Ethan is always ready, always wary, always worried about what threat might next rear its ugly head. His mind is always filled with possibilities, his dreams plagued by ominous warnings and apocalyptic images. The remnants of Lane's syndicate have started calling themselves the Apostles. They've joined forces with someone issuing deadly manifestos, a mysterious killer named John Lark. A nuclear weapons expert and 3 Russian plutonium cores have gone missing. The authorities believe that the cores could be weaponized within 72 hours. And no one knows the whereabouts of any of the above pieces or players. It's time for Ethan and his team to leap into action once again, right? But it's not quite that easy this go round. You see, the CIA is none too happy with some mistakes Ethan and his team made in the recent past. So the agency has gotten official approval to place an agent of its own on Ethan's team. You use a scalpel, CIA Director Erica Sloan says of the IMF's methods. I prefer a hammer. And that's exactly what Agent August Walker is, a human sledgehammer with the go-ahead to come crashing down on anything or anyone that gets between him and those nuclear cores. Oh, and then there's Madman Solomon Lane again. Did I mention that facilitating his escape needs to be part of the plan? There's also a dangerous MI6 agent with her own agenda floating around out there, too. And if all that isn't enough drama, Ethan's beloved ex-wife, Julia, is in someone's crosshairs as well. Sounds like this mission might not only be impossible, but maybe a train wreck, too. And Ethan thought he was having a hard time sleeping before all this. For all of the death and destruction on hand here, and there's plenty of both, the film makes it clear that human life is something to value. Ethan repeatedly goes the extra mile to save the lives of individuals, including people he doesn't really care for, even though the easier path would be to walk away without worrying about such collateral causalities. In fact, Ethan's fellow IMF agent, Luther, gets pretty emotional about the sacrificial choices Ethan made that saved his life. And he's not the only character to recognize Ethan's selflessness. Ethan apologizes to his ex, Julia, for all the pain he says he's caused her. But she balks at that idea. She says that those difficult, painful parts of her life have shaped her into the woman she is today. She also says those experiences have given her opportunities to serve others and do what she enjoys most. A TV news report mentions that 3 religious sites, Jerusalem, Mecca, and Rome, have been bombed by terrorists. Ethan and Walker drag an unconscious villain into a public bathroom stall to scan his face. Several men outside the stall think they're actually having sex. They knock on the stall door, asking to join in. Good guys and bad blaze away at each other with pistols and automatic weapons in several scenes. Some people are hit by bullets and sent bloodlessly tumbling to the ground. The bloodiest moments in the film, however, take place during well-choreographed and up-close fight scenes. One of those melees, which takes place in a stylish public restroom, features several combatants being pummeled and smashed through walls and mirrors. They're scraped up in brutal ways before someone gets shot in the face. We don't see that bullet's impact, but the white-tiled floor is splashed with a large pool of blood and gore. Elsewhere, a female MI6 agent leaps into a fight with a villain who punches her repeatedly in the face. She eventually stabs him in the leg with a broken bottle and chokes him with a rope. Ethan battles another baddie in something of a helicopter demolition derby that leaves both men badly battered and bleeding. Someone is caught in the face by a large metal hook that drags him to his death. Men are shot and thrown out of a helicopter. A policewoman is shot in the leg by 4 threatening thugs, and Ethan has to kill them all to save her life. One character kicks another full in the face. Lightning strikes 2 men, knocking both of them out. Men are stabbed repeatedly in the chest with a small knife. A huge car chase crumples up vehicles and sends people flying pell-mell off motorcycles. Policemen are shot. A woman gets hit by a car and left in a crumpled pile on the street. A man hangs by his neck, struggling and gasping for breath. The threatened nuclear explosion is said to exceed the power of both atomic bombs dropped during World War II. It is cruelly designed to not only kill thousands through its initial detonation, but to contaminate the water supply of 1/3 of the world's population afterward. We see an atomic detonation in Ethan's dream, as well as the obliterating impact it has on several people standing in the explosion's wake. We also see images of burning rubble on a television screen. Several people get injected with a tranquilizer drug. We're told that a virulent dosage of a smallpox virus has been purposely released into the populace of a small village. Mission Impossible Fallout is, quite frankly, the epitome of today's spy guy actioner. It clips along at a pace that's just shy of a heart attack and neatly tucks in all the exciting bits that most people expect from a top-shelf, bullet-whizzing franchise like this one. An emotionally tortured hero? You bet. This pic showcases Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt as he heroically tries to save every life he can, while worrying that when it comes to those he loves most he might just fall short. Chin-rubbing intrigue? That's there, too. Screenwriter/director Christopher McQuarrie packs the 6th Mission Impossible entry with so many subplots, covert government agencies, chain-linked atomic bombs and double-crossing characters that you'll feel like a mental juggler who needs a few extra hands to track it all as you watch. Clock ticking, go for broke action? This film delivers, featuring massive gun battles, fevered car chases in the streets of Paris and somersaults off tall buildings to name but a few of the frenetic scenes here. Why, there's even a helicopter smash up in the snow-capped mountains of Kashmir. So strap in and hold on, Bucky, this breakneck cinematic blender is set to liquefy, the top is off, and you're the main ingredient. Now, should you choose to accept all that for a night at the Flickers, well, you're in for a thrilling ride. But be prepared for the requisite secret agent stuff that's part of the ticket. Spy guys and gals and their roguish adversaries are not gentle types. That means a whole lot of painful-looking mashing, bashing, and bone-breaking, some nasty expletives, and some incredibly intense and sometimes goopy death-dealing come spinning at you like a knife thrown from a darkened alley. The fact is, Ethan Hunt is able to breathe a sigh and forget the nastiness of yesterday when his work is done. But your youngsters may not be so relaxed about this flick and all of its spy world, Fallout. The recent main appeal of the Mission Impossible franchise is to watch the seemingly ageless space Jesus Tom Cruise attempt to kill himself in various ways. Mission Impossible, Fallout does not disappoint. While no particular stunt is as impressive as hanging on the side of an Airbus A400M Atlas while it takes off during the opening sequence in Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Honestly, my favorite stunt in any movie surpassing James Bond parachuting off the side of Mount Asgard in the opening scene of The Spy Who Loved Me. Of course, that was stunt double Rick Sylvester, not Roger Moore. All the Mission Impossible stunts seem to feature an unadulterated Tom Cruise and are very impressive indeed. Strangely, with all the impressive stunts, halo jumps, helicopter stunts, driving in Paris traffic, it was the bathroom fight scene that impressed me the most. Surpassing my previous favorite bathroom fight scene from the beginning of James Bond's Casino Royale. Okay, I will stop now. For one thing, it introduces the biggest surprise of the movie, a mustached Henry Cavill. I admit I never cared much for Henry Cavill. Of course, my only real experience was with him as Superman in Man of Steel, in which he was awful. Well, that might not have been Henry's fault. In Fallout, Henry Cavill is perfect. He plays his character so well you end up feeling sorry for him. He is easily the most lovable thing in a movie with two puppy dog-eyed sidekicks, Ving Rhames, Simon Pegg, and two puppy dog-eyed love interests, Rebecca Ferguson, Michelle Monaghan. The location shooting is also on point in Mission Impossible Fallout, with a particular kudo for using all of Paris and not just the 5-minute highlight tour. The movie has a wonderful sense of place and time, and the plot is practically followable if we are grading on the curve that is the previous Mission Impossible movies. The bad, supporting characters seem to be a chink in the armor of the Mission Impossible movies. Henry Cavill, lauded above, and Simon Pegg gets an easy pass. On the villainous side, Vanessa Kirby as Lady Gaga and Sean Harris as the Unabomber both put in brilliant work. I thought it was time for Luther, Ving Rhames, to retire in Rogue Nation, and Fallout has not changed my mind. He seems more like a punch-drunk kidnap victim rather than a highly trained agent. The love interests are a bit of a mess. Rebecca Ferguson is way too kittenish to be believable as an MI6 agent that could turn on you at any moment, and Michelle Monaghan comes across less than the love of Ethan Hunt's life and more like that college girlfriend who you dated before you met your wife and whose name you can't quite remember even though you lived together for 8 months. My winner, however, for worst side character is Angela Bassett. Now, Angela Bassett is a very talented actress, but her character is horribly written and she doesn't help matters. It was as if she saw Viola Davis' horrible performance in Suicide Squad and said, I am going to do that. The ugly, there is someone missing on this outing. Unfortunately, Jeremy Renner was needed on the Avengers Endgame set, presumably to get coffee for the actual heroes, and is replaced with the now demoted Alec Baldwin, whose character is hand-waved to have taken that demotion from the director of the Central Intelligence Agency to Tom Cruise's fluffer because he believes in the team. There is a scene where Alec Baldwin has a fist fight with Henry Cavill. I am not sure what they were going for here. Drama, suspense, pathos. But I am sure that the actual reaction of OMG no, followed by gales of laughter, was not what the director Christopher McQuarrie was aiming for. Wow. I don't even know where to start. For a series of films built preeminently on incredible action set pieces and a penchant for self-one-upmanship with Tom Cruise at the lead, you know that Mission Impossible Fallout was designed from day one to be a wild ride. How effective of one would it be? That was really the only question. It's corny to say it, but the series already did a couple films ago, so I guess I have permission. Mission accomplished. Defying all conventional Hollywood wisdom, the 6th installment of the series is very well the best one yet, and I say yet because, at this rate, I don't doubt Cruise will muster up the fervor to continue these until he looks like Jim Phelps in his last installment. Why do I believe this? Let's dig in. As this film functions as a complete extension of the last film, also directed by the series' first repeat director, Christopher McQuarrie, we open with an extension of Rogue Nation's interesting opening. Just as that film featured the mission briefing delivered to Ethan Hunt, Cruise, advancing the characterization beyond the action hero cipher of films past, through an antiquated method, record player, this film delivers it with the churning and whirring of a gearbox, reminding us of the analog nature of why we love these films. Among the deluge of digital playgrounds that fill cinemas on a weekly basis, there is a respite in knowing that IMF agent Ethan Hunt can always find ways to thrill us with the oomph that can only come from practical stunt work. The syndicate that has been slowly building and manipulating behind the scenes globally has morphed into a new form, the Apostles, and as the name implies, there is a religious fervor to usurping the world order. While gamers might connect the film's title to the video game series of Fallout by name alone, that connection does actually work. Recovery of plutonium cores that are set to power 3 nuclear explosives is what gets the incredibly powerful and efficient machine that is this film going. As trailers show, Solomon Lane, played again through chilling whispers by Sean Harris, the villainous mastermind of the syndicate, is a part of the Apostles' plans. Hunt and crew find themselves caught in the middle of incredible forces that could very easily destroy life globally and end theirs personally. Divulging much more will unlock the secrets that should only be revealed through viewing. There's a hypnotic energy to this film's pacing. The sheer number of impressive action set pieces is incredible, and while everyone will remember Cruz climbing the Burj Khalifa in Ghost Protocol, here, we may very well have one of the best choreographed and edited action films of all time. That film centered around that incredible sequence, but here, we have an almost beginning to end steam train of pure movie magic that hits hard and doesn't stop. Dialogue and plot act as moments to catch our breath, but even in the midst of action sequences, the storytelling continues in creative ways. While I am a lover of Daniel Craig's series of James Bond films, Quantum of Solace, in particular, got lost in the editing room with some of its action sequences, thereby leaving audiences dazed and confused. Such things are never an issue here. Yes, the camera finds itself placed in ways that just shouldn't be possible, but the shots it captures always reinforce the spatial layout of everyone and everything. Even as it was all thrilling, never was I lost in what was going on, and after years of critiques in action filmmaking, hopefully, this film will be a lesson to all other films to come. Punches land here with power, crashes are felt, and, all in all, the energy runs high. There are many reasons Henry Cavill was cast here as Agent August Walker, a tag-along assigned to work with Ethan, due to CIA oversight from their new director, Angela Bassett. The primary one being is that he is a beast on screen. In the expertly crafted bathroom fight scene shown heavily in trailers, he seems to reload his arms, and I believed it. The effectiveness of this film as an action film can't be overstated, and I haven't even gotten to the twists and turns of the plot. While this film felt less fun or funny than the last two, it all happens out of necessity. The stakes have never felt higher, and with a larger team of people we genuinely care about, I was fully wrapped up in everything happening to everybody. The plot has always somehow seemed secondary in these series of films, but McQuarrie, in particular, has elevated it to a higher priority in Rogue Nation and now here. In my opinion, he crafts his two films to be a full realization of what the series always could be, even after its inconsistent start with earlier films. As the marketing stills show, colors seem muted here throughout, but I believe it makes the colorful moments in the film like the halo jump and subsequent nightclub scene look even better as a result. I've yet to talk about Ilsa Faust, Rebecca Ferguson, but she returns with an interesting plot thread. This film delves into the themes of the greater good and personal justice in a multitude of ways, and she is just one of the many ways that's all unpacked. Ethan Hunt is given the opportunity to hone his moral code here by the situations that come, and as a result, he becomes a far better character overall. The danger dampens the opportunities for humor, as mentioned, but Benji, Simon Pegg, and Luther, Ving Rhames, get chuckles right when we need them. Also worth mentioning is how this film finds great ways to incorporate plot elements from the entire series here, a true first in a series that has felt so disjointed. Alongside that, I felt genuine emotion towards the end with character interactions rooted in long-running plot developments from earlier films. That kind of emotion only comes with films connected by plot, and I'm so glad that the series has embraced it. Content-wise, the violence hits hard, but there is nothing gratuitous to me or unnecessary. Everything feels real, and as a result, gore or death isn't glorified. I was disappointed in the F-bomb delivered here, and considering who gives it and his other well-known film role, it felt cheap and unnecessary to me. Sexual content is completely a non-factor here, which is interesting in a spy film. The terrorist group being named the Apostles and their planned attacks on the world's holy cities ties the film to the Bible, but it doesn't explicitly go any deeper than that. I am authoring a Geeks Under Grace Bible study for the film, and I plan to go into the themes of providence and the sanctity of life. Check it out once it is published. Overall, I cannot recommend this film highly enough. It's satisfying on so many levels. In a summer of Thanos and dinosaurs, it's quite a testament that of all those films, I think I had the strongest compulsion to rewatch this. If you have even had a passing interest in any of the preceding films in the series at all, you owe it to yourself to catch up to this one and experience the thrill ride it offers. It is a further perfecting of what the series can deliver, and kudos to Cruise to continuing to find new ways to put himself into the ire of insurance companies everywhere, doing things no sane person would attempt. The meticulous direction from McQuarrie has me hoping that he and Cruise work out a deal for him to continue directing this partnership until jumping or hanging from any high point is, well, impossible. With the series being this good this far into itself, long live Ethan Hunt. What started as a successful but slightly schizophrenic pet project has evolved into one of my very favorite movie franchises. Aside from the common thread of their high-profile star, the first 3 Mission Impossible installments couldn't feel more different. It was mainly due to having 3 very different directors, each with their own unique stamp. While I enjoyed each of them to varying degrees, it was still tough to put a finger on what the series wanted to be. That started to change with Ghost Protocol from director number 4 Brad Bird. It put pieces in place and set the table for director number 5 Christopher McQuarrie and what would be the best MI movie to date. Rogue Nation not only felt connected to its predecessor beyond Tom Cruise's presence, but it was incredibly well made and left audiences with a much clearer vision of what the franchise is shooting for. Fans of Rogue Nation rejoice. Christopher McQuarrie breaks the revolving director trend and returns for Fallout, a movie that ups the ante in terms of breathtaking action yet still tells a thrilling story that well serves its fabulous band of characters. McQuarrie has been working towards Fallout, building its framework for several films now. He did uncredited rewrites for Ghost Protocol, co-wrote Rogue Nation, and handles the entire script for Fallout. This is his baby and he knocks it out of the park. Of course Cruise returns along with mainstays Ving Rhames and Simon Pegg. Also back is Rebecca Ferguson who debuted and stole the show in Rogue Nation. In a prologue 56-year-old, but far from looking it, Cruise's Ethan Hunt is informed that 3 plutonium cores have been stolen by a terrorist group calling themselves the Apostles. They are an offshoot of the Syndicate, see Rogue Nation, ran by a mystery man named John Lark. Ethan calls in his IMF cohorts, the neurotic Benji, Peg, and easygoing Luther, Rhames, to help regain the cores, but the mission goes awry and the plutonium heads to the black market. Ethan is able to track the plutonium to Paris where a transaction is said to take place near the Grand Palais. Before he can head that way, freshly christened CIA Director Sloan, Angela Bassett, orders him to take along Agent Walker, Henry Cavill, a CIA observer and Sloan's own personal hammer. Basically he's sent to make sure the mission succeeds whatever the cost. As Cavill says in his wryest and driest voice, that's the job. If you follow the series you know the story can't possibly stay in one location. In addition to Paris we make stops in Belfast, London, even Kashmir, played by Norway. Along the way we get a white-knuckled motorcycle chase around the Arc de Triomphe, a foot race across London rooftops, which actually resulted in Cruise breaking his ankle, a mind-blowing helicopter duel through the snow-capped mountains of Kashmir, just to name a few. The action sequences are nothing short of exhilarating, mostly done through traditional stunt work and practical effects. The touches of CGI make a handful of scenes even more breathtaking. And what's best is McQuarrie shoots them with visual coherence. No indecipherable shaky cams and quick cuts. It's something to behold. But Fallout is more that credits to credits action. McQuarrie threads these sequences together with a classic-style spy story full of twists, double crosses, intersecting plot lines and of course one big nuclear threat. In the middle of it all is returning Rogue Nation baddie Solomon Lane, Sean Harris, an anarchist with a personal axe to grind with the current world order and with Ethan Hunt. His two-headed mantra, the greater the suffering, the greater the peace, is just as much directed at Ethan as to the world system. Adding another kink is the resurfacing of Ilsa Faust, Ferguson, once out of the game but now back in and with her own mysterious agenda. McQuarrie moves us through his wonderfully naughty plot at a crackling pace, tossing us enough twists and turns to ensure there is no downtime for measuring if every piece lines up perfectly. But it's smart enough to keep us locked in and constantly guessing. And Cruise remains the heart of the franchise. His insane physicality and daredevil willingness to risk life and limb for every shot has never been more evident. But it's the character-centric moments that speak volumes. He's still a vulnerable hero, even a bit naive. And more than any other MI installment, Fallout centralizes his unshakable moral code as key component of not just this film but the entire series. Mission Impossible continues to be the rare film franchise that actually gets better with age. Fallout makes no attempt to reinvent the wheel. Instead, it takes the best elements of its predecessors and then cranks the dial past 10. Cruise and company's ability to consistently up their game has culminated in this action movie masterclass that earns every ounce of acclaim it's getting. Knowing their history, I'm definitely on board for more. But if the next movie's mission, should they choose to accept it, is to top Fallout, it could truly prove to be impossible. Ethan Hunt must track down stolen plutonium and a dangerous agent, leading to many dangerous situations. The plot continues to be pretty thin, as is the usual with spy flicks, but I personally found this movie more story-driven than the previous entries, which doesn't say a lot, but it's still worth mentioning. Ethan Hunt is more vulnerable and tired here than usual, and you can see his age and suffering, which was interesting, along with his ex-girlfriend, and all those scenes were definitely moving. But this ended up being a giant missed opportunity to make a statement about the dangers of being in the spy business. The movie definitely has some interesting themes, but it unfortunately left them all unexplored in favor of once again excessive, non-stop action. Tom Cruise continues to be the driving force of this entire franchise, and even more so in this installment than before. That's because he did most of his character's stunts on his own instead of employing a stunt double, and that led to such an admirably authentic action movie. His crazy dedication, where he risks his own life for a movie, paid off significantly and made this movie unforgettable in its genre. He truly is a great action star. Rebecca Ferguson's Ilsa Faust is ridiculously underutilized, but she still kicked some major ass in a couple of fantastic sequences. Ving Rhames is a wonderful soul here, Sean Harris plays a solid villain, and Simon Pegg's Benji continues to be such a great, endearing comic relief in this series. I loved how this movie is very much a team film in spite of Cruise's obvious intentions to steal the show. Mission Impossible Fallout most definitely has overwhelming action and a ridiculous all-out approach when it comes to the danger and tension. Hollywood fails to understand that it's better to have a couple of highly dangerous and extremely intense situations than to have the whole movie be like that. This movie made the same mistake, and thus its impact was seriously blunted because of that. But still, there is no denying the power of the action sequences here. It is one of the best action films recently because the action is extremely well crafted, utilized, and always exhilarating and highly entertaining to watch. The stunts are fantastic, and clearly there are some amazing standouts to be had here, including the helicopter chase, which is simply awesome. The Benji and Elsa/Solomon Lane fight is phenomenal. Hunt's running on rooftops steals the show, and in my opinion the motorcycle chase is the highlight of the film. I personally dislike such scenes, but this one is so meticulously crafted and hugely entertaining that I loved every second of it. The tech is thankfully reduced in Fallout in favor of some old school spy action. The movie definitely has many soon-to-be iconic set pieces and brilliantly choreographed fight sequences, but it also has amazing cinematography which makes use of its glorious city settings so well, with Paris definitely being the standout. I also found the score phenomenal and pleasantly old-fashioned. The humor's also pretty solid, though only rarely present. If we simply must keep getting the same movies over and over and over again, and that is not a concession that the status quo is unchangeable, they need to be at least as good as Mission Impossible, Fallout. Though perhaps with less convoluted punctuation in their titles. Actually, that's the opening paragraph of my review of the last MI flick, 2015's Rogue Nation. I just dropped in the subtitle of this latest one. And in fact, I could have just dropped my entire highly positive review of Nation here, and it would work fine. Choice and entirely suitable tidbits from 3 years ago that slot perfectly well into my reaction to Fallout. This is all good, right? I mean, of course it's good. Writer-director Christopher McQuarrie, Edge of Tomorrow, Jack Reacher, returning from Nation, has crafted a masterful spy thriller. Its 2.5-hour runtime zips by. It's hard to believe, by the time it's over, that the movie is as long as it is. It's relentless and ridiculously exciting. I had so much fun with it, often laughing out loud in relief when the tension of a breathless action scene finally broke. Star Tom Cruise, American-made, Jack Reacher, Never Go Back, whose movie star It Only Gets It Here All the Time, is insanely dedicated to ensuring that we believe his super spy Ethan Hunt is actually doing the outrageous things we watch him doing, because the actor is actually doing them at risk of his own life and limb. Which is nuts, and how do the insurance people even allow this? Like leaping from rooftop to rooftop, the take in which he broke his ankle doing so appears to be the one that ended up in the finished film, maybe it was the only take. And learning how to pilot a helicopter so that he could perform his own dangerous flying without having to resort to green screens and CGI to fake it. Cruise looking genuinely terrified on the cameras looking into the cockpit in the sequence helps sell the plausibility. See image at the top of this review. McQuarrie and Cruise have jointly upped the ante on the action movie, and it's going to be tough for future films, in this series and beyond, hello, Mr. Bond, to keep up. Probably it's just me. Current events and awful summer weather are making it difficult for me to work up much enthusiasm for movies at the moment. Proper air conditioning is hard to come by in London, it feels too hot to think. Perhaps the most enjoyable aspect of my Fallout press screening was how deliciously, and atypically for this town, cold that IMAX screen was. Or maybe it's that Fallout isn't quite as clever as it initially suggests it's going to be. McQuarrie's script plays with our expectations of the genre, most especially with the nuclear MacGuffin it deploys. Some particularly bad villains are after black market plutonium cores they could use to build suitcase bombs, and Hunt and his team must find the plutonium before they can acquire it. These bad guys may possibly under the direction of terrorist for hire Solomon Lane Sean Harris, Serena, deliver us from evil. Never mind that Hunt captured him in the last film and that Lane is now in incredibly protective and sequestered governmental custody. Fallout appears to open with what would be the endgame in a lesser movie. Hunt and Benji, Simon Pegg, Ready Player One, Star Trek Beyond, and Luther, Ving Rhames, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Piranha 3DD, are about to buy the nuclear fuel from an arms dealer. And then appears to go places from there that such movies typically dare not go even in their big blow-up finales. So at first I thought hoped against hope, in fact that Fallout was doing what so few stories ostensibly about world-changing possibilities do, actually change the world. In this case, changing the world via nuclear means would be horrific, and would impinge on the escapism that is the primary mission of movies like this one, which the MI series has, with the recent installments at least, done supremely well. So, again, it's all on me, for unfairly expecting something more radical that the series had ever promised to deliver. But, also, if you're gonna up the ante on a genre, that would be one way to do it. I guess I'm happy to settle for a thrilling motorcycle chase through wrong-way traffic around the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, one in which it sure as heck looks like Cruise authentically risked life and limb to shoot. Settling for the brutal ferocity of Henry Cavill, Justice League, the man from UNCLE, as Hunt's new partner/nemesis in CIA Special Activities Agent August Walker being happily bossed around by Angela Bassett. Black Panther, London Has Fallen, is no bad thing. Settling for the incomparably smooth and cool Rebecca Ferguson, the Snowman, the girl on the train, returning as mysterious operative Ilsa Faust, is just fine. Seriously, give this woman her own franchise. Settling for Ethan Hunt saying a storm is coming. I am the storm, and the movie making us believe this is fine, and even a sort of miracle since he's of the brand of good guy who agonizes over killing anyone and, in fact, if I recall correctly, is not actually directly responsible for anyone's death here. I guess I'm happy to settle for a franchise that is consistently this reliably smart and entertaining. I guess I'm greedy for wanting more. Right? Great action movies develop a rhythm like no other genre. Think of the way the stunts in Mad Max, Fury Road become a part of the storytelling. Think of how Die Hard flows so smoothly from scene to scene, making us feel like we're right there with John McClane. Think of the dazzling editing of Baby Driver and the way it incorporates sound design, music, and action into a seamless fabric that's toe-tapping. It's obviously incredible praise to say that Mission Impossible Fallout reminds me of these films. It's got that finely tuned, perfect blend of every technical element that it takes to make a great action film, all in service of a fantastic script and anchored by great action performances to not just work within the genre but to transcend it. This is one of the best movies of the year. For the first time in this franchise, director Christopher McQuarrie has made what is basically a direct sequel to the previous film, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Wasting absolutely no time, Fallout drops viewers into the narrative, getting the important details out of the way so the action can get started. So many action movies spend forever with monologuing villains and extensive set UPS. But there's no fat on this movie, even early on, where action so often takes too long to get to the good stuff, and definitely not late when the movie is intense enough to leave you exhausted. A group called the Apostles wants to create chaos. That's really all you need to know. They have a belief that suffering leads to peace, and so it's time to unleash the pain. They have been working with someone clearly on the inside at IMF codenamed John Lark and have conspired to obtain weapons-grade plutonium to create 3 dirty bombs. Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise, has to get the plutonium back, but there's a ghost haunting him in the form of Solomon Lane, Sean Harris, the villain from the last film who Hunt left alive instead of killing. The head of the syndicate has been passed around intelligence agencies, looking for information on the IMF agent killing group, but he's also a part of this new plot to end the world. As the movie opens, Hunt is tasked by his boss Alan Hunley, Alec Baldwin, to go to Paris to find John Lark before he buys the plutonium. He is handed a sidekick by Alan's superior Erica Sloane, Angela Bassett, in the form of the brutish August Walker, Henry Cavill. Sloane isn't sure she trusts Hunt or Hunley, and so wants one of her own men on the crucial mission, someone she knows will do whatever it takes to complete the mission. There's a thematic undercurrent through Fallout as to how much one should be willing to sacrifice for the greater good, the classic spy flick question of killing someone you love to save the lives of millions you don't. It's the action movie equivalent of the trolley problem. The implication is that Hunt is too protective of those he loves, while Walker loves no one, and the movie vacillates in fascinating ways as to which modus operandi is better for a super spy. Hunt is even described as the scalpel to Walker's hammer. This dynamic duo heads to Paris and are joined before long by familiar faces like Luther, Ving Rhames, Benji, Simon Pegg, and Ilsa, Rebecca Ferguson, and, well, things get deadly fast. Fallout is one of those excellent action movies that works whether you pay attention to the plot or not. It is one of the most streamlined and fast-paced films in Hollywood history, moving from one set piece to the next. Don't worry. There's a plot. And it's actually an interesting one that feels both timeless and current in the way that it plays with loyalty and identity. But McQuarrie and Cruise are keenly aware that they can't lean too heavily on the plot or people will lose interest. We don't need speeches. And so the dramatic stakes of the setup are pretty much enough. Nuclear bombs, a double agent or two, a homicidal mastermind now go? And, man, does Fallout go? Roughly 7 of the 10 best action sequences of the year will be from this film. There's a wonderful diversity in action styles too, from a skydiving nightmare to a car chase to, of course, a run-tom scene to the already famous helicopter sequence. All of them feature an intensity of movement that we hardly see in action movies anymore. Critics have already compared the film to Fury Road, and I think that's why the fluidity of motion that you see in both films. The great cinematographer Rob Hardy, Annihilation, and editor Eddie Hamilton, who did the last movie as well, have refined the action here with McQuarrie in such a perfect way. We rarely lose the geography of scenes, which is so common in bad action, and often feel like we're falling, speeding, or running with Hunt. The audience I saw it with was gasping and nervously laughing with each heart-racing sequence. See this one with a crowd. And as big as you can. Some of the footage was shot in IMAX, and it's worth the upcharge. Fallout isn't the kind of film one often gets pumped for in regard to performance, but even those are better than average here. It's fascinating to see how Cruise is finally allowing his age to show a little bit, especially in early scenes with Cavill, who looks like a tougher, stronger model of Ethan Hunt. Cruise's latest version of Hunt stumbles a few times and his punches don't land with the force of Walker's. It instills more relatability in a character who would have been less interesting as a superhuman spy. And the supporting cast is uniformly strong, especially Cavill and Rebecca Ferguson, who has the screen charisma of someone who really should be a superstar by now. Let's make that happen. It's easy to get cynical at the movies. With 8 sequels in the top 10 last week, more and more people see the Hollywood machine as just that, something that spits out product instead of art or even entertainment. Perhaps the best thing I can say about Mission Impossible Fallout is that it destroys cynicism. It truly does what so many people have looked for in entertainment for over a century: a chance for real-world worries to take a backseat for a couple hours. You'll be too busy worrying how Ethan Hunt is going to get out of this one to care about anything outside the theater. It's a rare action movie that can do that so well that you not only escape but walk out kind of invigorated and ready to take on the world. Mission Impossible Fallout is one of those movies. I had to wait a bit until I had some money to spare, but I finally saw Mission Impossible Fallout. This is the second consecutive film in the MI series to be written and directed by Christopher McQuarrie, and the first time that any director has done a second MI film. Every film in the series since the fourth one has built more and more upon its predecessors, and this is the one that connects most directly to previous films, primarily McQuarrie's previous installment Rogue Nation, but with major links to MI3, and a surprising connection to yet another installment. It reunites nearly all the main cast from IMF agents Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise, Luther Stickle, Ving Rhames, and Benji Dunn, Simon Pegg, IMF Secretary Hunley, Alec Baldwin, Rogue Agent Ilsa Faust, Rebecca Ferguson, and villain Solomon Lane, Sean Harris. The one no-show is Jeremy Renner's Brandt, whose absence is never acknowledged or explained. It was allegedly due to Renner's commitment to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is odd, because his last appearance as Hawkeye was 2 years ago. Notably, the film also brings back Michelle Monaghan's Julia, Ethan's bride from MI3, last seen only in a cameo in Ghost Protocol. Unlike its predecessor, Fallout starts slowly with Ethan having a nightmare. He's marrying Julia, but the priest is Solomon Lane, who recites the litany of how Ethan failed and abandoned Julia before they're vaporized in a nuclear blast. It's a handy way to re-establish Julia and Ethan's backstory for the audience, and a nice callback to 3, which also started off with a focus on the Ethan-Julia relationship. I felt Rogue Nation was less successful at substantive characterization than the previous 2 films, but Fallout was off to a good start with this. Although it can sort of be read to imply that among his other superhuman powers, Ethan Hunt has developed precognition, Ethan then gets the secret briefing oddly delivered to his home in a vintage miniature reel-to-reel tape recorder, with built-in video projector, hidden inside an old book, at once an homage to the classic briefing scenes and a departure from them. since they've never been delivered straight to the lead character's door before, kind of defeats the whole purpose, doesn't it? We get an info dump, in McQuarrie's voice, about the Apostles, the remnants of Lane's syndicate from RN, and their terror attacks around the world, including a plague outbreak in Kashmir, designed to tear down the world order and bring the devastation from which they believe a new peace will spring. A thematic link to the motives of Ghost Protocol's villain, though no explicit connection is drawn. The Apostles, led by a mysterious guy codenamed John Lark, are trying to buy 3 stolen plutonium cores to make nuclear bombs. We jump right to Ethan and Benji buying the, improbably lightweight, plutonium cores from the thieves, with Luther running ops from the van as usual. The movie deals with the overlap between Luthor's and Benji's tech support roles by moving Benji fully into the field agent role rather than the mix of both roles he played in the prior 2 films. This also fills the void left by Brandt. But he doesn't really do much besides banter with Ethan, and the buy is just a straight up buy, no hidden gambits or stratagems. When another faction takes Luther hostage and demands the plutonium, they, not the IMF, are the ones who pull a devious trick, using the threat to Luther's life to distract Ethan from the cores so they can steal them. At this point, I was afraid that this would be another film that was MI in name only, ignoring the intricate schemes and tricks that defined the original series. But then we cut to a scene where Wolf Blitzer reports that 3 nuclear bombs have gone off in Rome, Jerusalem, and Mecca simultaneously. The TV is in a hospital room where Ethan and Luther confront the satisfied bomb maker, who's told he's awoken from 2 weeks in a coma after a car crash. He agrees to give them info on Lark if Blitzer reads his manifesto on the air, figuring there's no harm now that the good guys have already lost. I was feeling much better at this point, because I recognized the trick the bad guy into thinking they've already won, so they give up the info gambit from several MI episodes, most prominently 2000, which also involved finding stolen plutonium. See also Operation Ragash, Invasion, and The Freeze. Once he gives them the info on Lark, Ethan opens up the fake hospital set and Benji whips off his Wolf Blitzer mask, telling the guy that he's only been out an hour, not 2 weeks. I have a quibble with the end credits, because they list Blitzer as playing himself, when strictly speaking he was playing Benji Dunn. All of this is before the main title sequence, which is much the same as RN's sequence in being a flashier riff on the original show's titles, with a burning fuse over clips from the adventure to follow. The music this time is by Lorne Balfe, and the theme is an interesting new variation on the Lalo Schifrin theme. Balfe's score overall is effective and richly orchestrated, but a bit repetitive, not as thematically rich as the previous couple of scores. After the credits, Baldwin's secretary Alan Hunley shows up in person. Then why bother with the secret tapes earlier, to send Ethan into Paris to infiltrate a party where Lark has arranged to meet the seller of the plutonium? But there's a bureaucratic clash as CIA Director Sloan, Angela Bassett, shows up, dismisses the IMF as Halloween play acting, and refuses to let Hunt go in unless he's accompanied by her number 1 hitman, August Walker. Walker is played by Henry Cavill, whose last involvement in the spy game was as Napoleon Solo in another remake of a 60s TV series, The Man from UNCLE. Here, Cavill is playing a very different kind of spy, intimidating in his bulk but utterly businesslike, calm, and matter-of-fact. He makes nothing personal, holds no grudges, just does the job, but since that job is assassination, it's an effectively unnerving characterization. In a way, it's almost the dark reflection of Cavill's Superman, that same relaxed, unaffected strength and ultra-competence, but directed toward ending lives rather than saving them. Anyway, here's where the thematic conflict of the film is established. Sloan is willing to use a hardened killer to get the job done and doesn't care about collateral damage. But Hunley tells Ethan not to beat himself up for choosing Luther's life over the plutonium, because his refusal to sacrifice one life for many is his greatest strength. It's a nice moment. Hunley's feelings toward Ethan have clearly become far warmer and more fatherly between movies. For reasons which the film has no interest in addressing, Ethan and Walker fly over the city in a military cargo plane and do a halo, high altitude, low opening, parachute drop, an excuse for Tom Cruise to do one of his trademark for real stunt scenes, a continuous take from the plane to, nearly, the ground. While the stunt dive is real, and frankly I'm more impressed by the camera operator than by Cruise, since he had to do all the same stunts backward and with the camera strapped to his helmet. The background is digitally altered to create a thunderstorm Hunt and Walker have to dive through, requiring Ethan to save Walker's life after he's knocked out by a lightning bolt, without Walker ever realizing that Ethan saved him. It's a spectacular sequence, to be sure, but it makes no damn sense. A halo drop is for infiltrating an enemy country or military camp, flying above the radar and waiting to deploy chutes until the last possible second to minimize detection risk. It's something you do to avoid getting shot down by enemy artillery. Ethan and Walker had to infiltrate a party in the middle of Paris. Surely there must have been far simpler ways to sneak into the building. Once inside, Ethan insists on doing things his way: identify Lark, knock him out, make a mask, impersonate him, buy the plutonium. Of course, things go very wrong and there's a big fight in the men's room, and Ethan is saved by the unexpected reappearance of Ilsa Faust, who kills the person they think is Lark before he can kill Ethan. She warns him that Lark is a target of assassins, and backs him up as he meets the contact while pretending to be Lark. The contact is a woman known as the White Widow, the scintillating Vanessa Kirby, whose dialogue subtly reveals her to be the daughter of Max, Vanessa Redgrave's arms dealer character from the first MI film 22 years ago. It's the second time a Christopher McQuarrie MI film has called back to the original film, although it's subtle enough to miss. I was wondering if Kirby might have been Redgrave's daughter in real life. As it turns out, Redgrave was a friend of her family. Anyway, Ethan and Ilsa save the White Widow from assassins, though it's unclear who the real target is. Afterward, we see Walker delivering Lark's phone to Sloane and telling her it has data on it suggesting that Ethan Hunt is the real John Lark. But McQuarrie made a point of showing us earlier that Lark's phone was shattered in the fight, while the phone Walker hands Sloane is intact. As if it hadn't been obvious from the start that Walker would turn out to be the bad guy. So anyway, the White Widow tells Ethan that she's just a broker for the plutonium thieves. If he wants the PU, he has to make a trade by breaking out Solomon Lane and delivering him to them. After Ethan swallows the need for this and asks what the plan is, we see a sequence of him and WW's men ambushing the convoy and killing a bunch of cops to free Lane. Has Ethan compromised his morals that much that he'd kill dozens of innocents to prevent a nuclear holocaust? But no, it's just Ethan visualizing WW's plan in his mind, and he then decides he has a better plan. He rams the armored truck carrying Lane into the Seine, or maybe it's a canal, and leads the cops on a very lively, well choreographed, beautifully shot chase through the scenic streets of Paris, while Benji dives down and frees Lane before he drowns. The bulk of the sequence is scored by Balf's version of the main title theme, and I was getting frustrated by the lack of the plot, the leitmotif that traditionally accompanies the capers as they unfold. I was starting to worry that this might be the only MI production other than MI2 that omitted that motif altogether. But as soon as we get the reveal of Benji and Luther extracting Ethan from the chase through an underground canal, the plot is heard in its full glory, in something quite close to its original double bass and snare drum arrangement from the show. But there's a complication or two yet to come. As the team is loading the captive, hooded Lane into a car, they open the door to discover a hapless young traffic cop standing there, evidently giving a parking ticket. She sees what looks like a kidnapping and draws her gun, and Ethan tries to talk her down peacefully before Walker shoots her. She then gets shot by a group of WW's men who've been looking for Ethan, and he shoots them down to save the young gendarme and helps her call for medical assistance. It's a fairly touching moment, rather remarkable to see in a blockbuster spy action movie. The next complication is Ilsa, who tries to kill Lane and inexplicably only wings him. After another long chase, Ethan gets Lane away from her, then meets her later and finds out that MI6 wants her to kill Lane to prove that she isn't a threat to them. Her original assignment was to protect Lark so he'd lead her to Lane, but she killed him instead to save Ethan. Still, she won't let Ethan get in the way of her completing her mission, since MI6 will kill her if she doesn't. I gotta say, British intelligence comes off really badly in these two films. Since the Paris scenery has been exhausted by this point, the story arbitrarily moves to London, where Hunley shows up at an IMF safe house and confronts Ethan about the Lark accusations, demanding that he shut down the operation, bring Lane in, and let the CIA worry about the plutonium. Ethan knocks him out, turns Benji into a masked copy of Lane, and convinces Walker to give them a chance to do the job before he applies his sledgehammer methods. Once alone with Lane, Walker reveals that he's the real John Lark and was working with Lane all along. But guess what, this Lane is actually Benji, though I can't see how the switch was pulled off, and Walker's just outed himself as the bad guy, with Hunley's willing cooperation in the plot. Hunley has Sloane on his cell and she sends in her troops to bring in Lane, but half the troops work for Walker/Lark and kill the other half, and the main characters fight, with Hunley making a good effort but ultimately getting killed by Walker. Which I guess I should have seen coming when they made him a father figure to Ethan. Anyway, Ilsa randomly shows up and helps in the fight, and for the rest of the film she's treated as a full member of the team, even though we never see a moment where Benji and Luther go through the process of accepting her. Maybe the effortlessness of their acceptance is the point, but even so, it would have been nice to have at least a momentary acknowledgement, rather than feeling like we've sidestepped into a slightly alternate reality where she was already on the team. But the film is focused on another action set piece of Ethan chasing after Walker over the London rooftops to keep him from escaping. It gives Cruise a chance to break out the patented Tom Cruise run once more, though after all this time the PTCR is visibly slower and more labored than it used to be. I gather Cruise actually broke his ankle during the sequence and that the shot was kept in the film. I think it's the point where he misses a jump, catches the building edge, and pulls himself up, but I couldn't tell for sure. Walker gets away, but not before revealing that he knows where Ethan's ex-wife Julia is and will have her killed if Ethan follows him. After this, Luther fills Ilsa in on Ethan and Julia's backstory, although his explanation of why they split up and how she ended up staying hidden doesn't exactly align with the events of Ghost Protocol. But it's more about establishing a character arc for Ethan, about how he couldn't focus on the work if Julia were on his mind. The team remembers that Lark's apostles released a plague in Kashmir, which led to the establishment of a medical camp. They realize that if the bombs were set off there, it would contaminate a glacier and poison a third of the world's water supply. It wouldn't really. They rush to Kashmir, but are in the dark about why the apostles would want a medical camp there. I saw it immediately, though, once I remembered that Julia was a doctor. I should mention that it was established earlier that Lane was doing your standard recurring villain thing where his evil plans were personally directed at the film's hero, not just bringing down the world order but making sure that Ethan Hunt was on hand to see all his plans and loved ones brought to ruin. So this whole massive Kashmir strategy we've been hearing about since the cold open was all about manipulating Ethan's ex-wife to be at ground zero. By the way, this opens a bit of a plot hole. When they caught the bomb maker in the cold open and tricked him into thinking the bombs had been meant to attack 3 holy cities, how did they know he wasn't aware of the real target? They took a gamble there. Sure enough, they find Julia at the relief camp. She's now remarried, and what Luther said about Ethan's divided focus never comes into play, or maybe he just underestimated his old friend's ability to stay focused on the mission. Anyway, the IMF men find one of the bombs and Luther sets to disarm it while Benji and Ilsa search for the other, and Ethan takes off in a helicopter after Walker, who's in another helicopter with the detonator. Benji soused out that the only way to disarm the nukes is to shut them both down simultaneously after Ethan removes a key from the detonator, but only after the countdown has started. Walker has obligingly started the countdown, so Ethan just has to figure out how to get to him on a different helicopter while the others find and deactivate both bombs simultaneously. Julia finds Luther at his bomb and immediately asks how she can help. Ilsa finds the other bomb and must fight Lane, forced to choose between killing him and saving Benji's life. Of course she chooses the latter. Ethan goes through another insane series of almost real helicopter stunts, though judging from the behind-the-scenes footage I've seen, they digitally altered the backgrounds again, adding snow on the mountains to make them more convincingly Himalayan, and a big climactic fight with Walker to get the key, and even though they're out of radio contact with Ethan, Luther and Benji trust him to have succeeded, and indeed he has at the literal last second. How the detonator's shutdown signal could get through when Ethan's comms couldn't is left as an exercise for the viewer. But Sloane shows up to medevac Ethan to safety, finally convinced of the IMF's value. Lane is taken alive for the second movie in a row, though Walker isn't so lucky, and the White Widow delivers him to MI6, clearing Ilsa's ledger and presumably paving the way for her to finally join the IMF. All in all, this is a much better movie than Rogue Nation and one of the very best in the series. Its action and intrigue are top-notch, and it does make a better effort at exploring character and relationships than its predecessor did. Although it isn't entirely smooth in the execution. A lot of the action beats are set up in implausible ways, especially the totally pointless Halo drop, though they're also magnificently executed that it's hard to complain. Also, it's great to see the long-dormant thread of Ethan and Julia's relationship finally brought to the fore again after being ignored in the previous film, but it's odd how detached Ethan himself is from that exploration. Luther does more of the heavy lifting for that particular plot thread than Ethan does, through his exposition to Ilsa and his conversation with Julia while they disarm the bomb. Ethan and Julia get very little time together to really talk about anything. That's actually rather disappointing when I consider how crucial their relationship was to III's success. What I really love about this film, though, is its repeated emphasis on the idea that what makes Ethan Hunt special is his concern for individual lives, something that isn't just talked about but shown, as in the Paris sequences where he's twice faced with the choice of sacrificing innocence to get the job done and instead makes a point of finding a better, less bloody way. It's refreshing to see a spy movie that focuses on its hero's efforts to save lives rather than take them. To be sure, Ethan and the team do rack up a body count of villains, but not a huge one by spy movie standards, given that so many of the big action sequences are chases rather than fights. I like the idea that the IMF is about finding less violent solutions and protecting innocent lives. I'm not sure that was ever really emphasized in any previous film, though, or even in the TV series. True, nominally the IMF wasn't allowed to assassinate its targets, as was stated explicitly in the pilot but left implicit otherwise, and favored more creative, subtle means of achieving their ends, but they did often manipulate or trick their marks into killing each other. I much prefer this emphasis on protecting lives. In Rogue Nation, McQuarrie played up Ethan as a driven, obsessive figure, relentless in his pursuit of his foes, an unstoppable avenging angel. This time, though, he and Cruise chose to play up Ethan's compassion in contrast to Walker's business-like ruthlessness, and it makes him a far more likable lead. It's one of many ways in which McQuarrie has improved greatly in his sophomore outing with Mission Impossible. Now, let's see. Obviously the prior films that are the main touchstones for this sixth installment in the series were the fifth film, to which it's essentially a direct sequel, and the third, Through Julia. It also follows up on what the fourth film established about Ethan and Julia's separation, and technically the syndicate was introduced at the end of the fourth film, though its specifics weren't established until the fifth. And it ties indirectly to the first film Through the White Widow, daughter of Max. The hospital set sequence in the cold open is also a callback to the opening ploy in the original film, although both use elements from the TV series. Luther also tells Ilsa that there have been two women Ethan truly cared for in his life, but only talks about Julia. I thought at first that he meant Ilsa was the other one, but in retrospect I think it's more likely he meant Claire from the original film. That leaves only the second film. IMDb's trivia page reveals that the helicopter's terrain, pull-up, warning voice was the same audio used for the opening plane scene in MI2. but that's a pretty trivial connection that barely counts, and it may be that it's the same because it's a standard aircraft warning, though I don't know if it is. In terms of actual story and character elements, every prior film except 2 is acknowledged. Which makes sense, since 2 is by far the worst and the least characteristic of the series. Still, the overall pattern stands. The level of continuity in the MI films has been steadily increasing since Ghost Protocol. And I expect that trend to continue. I saw an article or two suggesting that Fallout seemed like the middle part of a trilogy, though the logic was that it had to be unfinished because Lane wasn't dead yet, and I'm not at all fond of the casual assumption in American feature films that a story's conclusion requires the villain's death. Still, that aside, the question of what Ilsa Faust does next now that she's free of MI6 remains open. I would like to see her properly join the IMF. Aside from Ferguson's strength as a lead, it's annoying that the IMF has been a boys' club for the past 2 movies, and that no female IMF member has ever lasted for more than 1 movie. Come to think of it, we saw as many female IMF members in the first film alone as in the entire remainder of the franchise. There were 3 women on Phelps's team in the first act of that film. Thandie Newton in 2 was a civilian recruit. 3 had Maggie Q and Carrie Russell, though not on the same team. 4 had Paula Patton, V, and 6 only had Ilsa, who's nominally a rival agent. Really, at this point, they should probably think about phasing Cruise out or putting him in the secretary role so Rebecca Ferguson could take over as the series lead. That way, they wouldn't have to worry about the franchise ending as Cruise and Rhames age out of it. Mission Impossible, Fallout, written and directed by Christopher McQuarrie, is the 6th film of the franchise and like all the others tells the story of Ethan Hunt of the Impossible Missions Force as he fights to save the world. The film stars Tom Cruise as Hunt with supporting turns from Henry Cavill, Ving Rhames, Simon Pegg, and Rebecca Ferguson. I have seen some of the previous 5 Mission Impossible films. I do not actually remember how many of them I have seen as they all blend into one gigantic ball of action, but I know for sure I saw the first, which was decent, and second, which was dreadful, and then the one where Tom Cruise interminably runs along canals in China. I would have skipped this newest member of the franchise except for 2 things. 1, I have Movie Pass so I could basically see it for free, and 2, I had a conversation the other day with a friend and he said that he heard that it was a really good movie and was the Dark Knight of the series. This was high praise indeed, for Dark Knight is the Everest of superhero movies. So, for those reasons I ventured out to the Cineplex to see Tom Cruise ply his trade. Mission Impossible, Fallout is a weird movie and that is evident from the get-go. During the opening credits they play the highlights of the movie that they are about to show you. This strikes me as incredibly strange. I mean, why in the hell are the filmmakers basically showing us a commercial for the film we already bought a ticket to? Also, why are they showing us everything that happens in the entirety of the movie during the first 5 minutes? These weren't the only questions raised by Mission Impossible, Fallout. Other questions I had were, what the hell is Tom Cruise doing and why the hell is he doing it? Cruise isn't so much an actor anymore as a professional athlete/stuntman at this point in his career. The plot of Fallout is nothing more than just an excuse for Tom Cruise to run, jump, fall, fly, drive, crash and fight with his usual over-the-top aplomb, and as he is the first one to tell the world over and over again, Cruise does his own stunts, each more insane than the next. The marketing campaign for M.I. Fallout is basically Tom Cruise doing interviews talking about all the stunts he does, which is all he has to talk about because the movie is so stupid that actually talking about it with a straight face is, ironically, an impossible mission. Some of Cruise's stunts, did I tell you that Cruise does his own stunts, are certainly daring, like Cruise doing his own skydiving and hanging from a helicopter, but the problem is, as challenging as those stunts were for Cruise to perform, they simply aren't very visually or cinematically interesting or satisfying. It is cool for Cruise to be able to say, hey, I did this. But it seems more important to me for those feats of daring do to be filmed in a way to maximize their cinematic impact. Cruise used to be the biggest movie star in the world, but now the world is sans movie stars, and Cruise is reduced to jumping out of planes or zipping around Paris on a motorcycle or hanging off of a cliff or helicopter or whatever is in reach for him to grip. But if you are Tom Cruise, why the hell do this junk? It isn't like he needs the money or help getting women, or men or whatever he is into. It isn't like me Fallout will garner him respect from his peers or awards. So why do this soulless, mindless crap? Of course the answer to that might just be that Tom Cruise is not an actual person but a business entity, and the flesh and blood Tom Cruise is subservient to Tom Cruise Incorporated, which is as soulless and mindless a venture imaginable, and which leaves the person Tom Cruise less a human being and more an automaton, which is why Cruise fits right in as the Christ of Scientology. What makes Cruise's absorption into the dead-eyed entity that is Tom Cruise Incorporated is that there was a time in his career where he was a decent actor who strove to be better at the craft of acting. Cruise sought out great directors like Coppola, Scorsese, Oliver Stone, Kubrick, and P.T. Anderson in order to try and become a great actor. These directors took Cruise out of his comfort and control zone and forced him to get better in films like Born on the 4th of July, The Color of Money, Magnolia, and even Eyes Wide Shut. It seems that Cruise threw in the acting towel after having not won an Oscar and now just churns out the worst sort of second-rate action junk he can get made. This is a bad career decision, as Cruise's time as an athletic action star are diminishing with every passing day. As any athlete will tell you, the older you get the harder it gets, and Cruise ain't getting younger. I think Cruise would be wiser to pursue the Magnolia approach, meaning he works with superior directors in smaller roles or smaller films in order to try and regain some artistic mojo before the lights go out on his career when he can't take the pounding of doing his own stunts. Regardless of the Tom Cruise questions, the bottom line is this: Mission Impossible, Fallout is a terrible movie. I guess all things are relative, but calling this the Dark Knight of the franchise is sort of like telling a guy who stands 3 foot high that he is extremely tall for a midget. The Mission Impossible franchise has devolved into a parody of itself, and the ever-expanding absurdity of the films were highlighted by the resounding guffaws by audience members at my screening. Fallout follows the tried and true formula of the other films in the series, as there are a series of double and triple crosses, usually involving masks that are also accompanied by cheap fake-out dream sequences, flash-forwards and flashbacks, and of course, to top it all off, Ving Rhames wears a hat. 2 things stood out to me in Fallout. The first is that there is a climactic sequence that I have titled the longest 15 minutes in human history that is so inane that the audience in my screening laughed out loud multiple times during the endless, allegedly 15-minute sequence. Secondly, Alec Baldwin does one scene in which he does the worst acting of his entire career and maybe in the history of the art form. I found it incredulous that Baldwin didn't burst out laughing as he was saying his eye-rollingly awful dialogue and look to the camera and wink to let us know he was in on the joke that was the script. There were some bright spots for me regarding Fallout, but I had to look very hard to find them. The first was Vanessa Kirby as the White Widow. I liked Kirby on Netflix's The Crown, where she played the Queen's party girl sister. I was pleased to see she is able to adequately fill the big screen, something television actors can at times struggle with, in Fallout. The other thing is actor Sean Harris, who plays the bad guy Solomon Lane. Harris isn't particularly great in the movie, but I just like him as an actor and was happy to see him getting a paycheck. In conclusion, I found Mission Impossible, Fallout, to be repetitive, boring, and entirely forgettable. Even though Tom Cruise puts himself through the ringer for this movie, have I mentioned that he does his own stunts, the whole endeavor is for naught. Mission Impossible, Fallout will no doubt make a tsunami of dollars, but my recommendation is that you withhold your money from that green tidal wave. The Mission Impossible movies are weird, because they're never really felt like an ongoing thing, like Star Wars, Marvel and DC cinematic universes, or even Lord of the Rings. They just dropped unannounced every couple years, delivering adequate thrills, ridiculous double crosses involving lifelike latex masks, and copious amount of footage of Tom Cruise running. Except for Brian De Palma's original film, The Mission impossible movies were never considered great and faced little to no expectations, except for the three variables named above. But have we slept on Mission Impossible all these years? Mission Impossible Fallout was released in theaters in late July, and well, it's the best self-consciously over-the-top popcorn movie I've seen in recent years. Fallout is the direct sequel to Rogue Nation, where our gorgeously haired protagonist Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise, battled a mythical international terrorist organization called the Syndicate. The organization might have been vanquished, but loyalists to its leader Solomon Lane, Sean Harris, remain scattered around the globe, acting under the name of the Apostles. Hunt is given for mission to remove plutonium from the black market after the mysterious de facto leader of the Apostles John Lark kidnaps a Norwegian nuclear scientist, Christopher Joner, to build 3 nuclear devices. But shit hits the fan. Hunt is forced to choose between the plutonium and a team member's life, so the former disappears again. Now, is it just me, or the Mission Impossible movies are becoming low-key fun under their latest writer and director Christopher McQuarrie? I mean, they don't have the slightest pretenses of being even remotely close to reality anymore. Tom Cruise abandoned the idea of playing anyone but himself. It features an imaginary terrorist organization built by anarchist secret agents instead of an easy scapegoat like Al-Qaeda or ISIS, and it embraces the idea of a rogue nuclear threat with a straight face like it hasn't been done by 1,000 action movies over the last 50 years. That's what makes Mission Impossible Fallout so much fun. It's a movie that's just trying to be a movie. And your only job is to let go and enjoy it. Speaking of which, let's talk about Mission Impossible Fallout's last half hour. Because Christopher McQuarrie and Tom Cruise let go of the will then, and the movie becomes abstract art. It delves into a level of ridiculousness that mirrors the last fight at the end of Bloodsport. By the 2-hour mark, the movie is over. There is no narrative left. But it goes on for half an hour on tension porn alone. I've never seen a movie that just refused to climax for so fucking long. It's like a tantric lover that denies you pleasure for the sake of its own orgasmic finale. It becomes so exhausting to follow Tom Cruise and the bad guys chasing one another in helicopters at some point that it makes you wonder what the fuck you're actually watching. I've enjoyed Mission Impossible Fallout way more than I thought I would. Up to a point where I'm starting to think we collectively haven't been nice enough to this franchise. Maybe it's our fear of Scientology that kept us from enjoying anything Tom Cruise is doing to its fullest. Maybe our constant and hopeless search for meaning lead us to dismiss these movies that don't have a greater purpose. But Mission Impossible is an anachronistic pleasure. They're movies that are just made to be enjoyed, like these 90s thrillers we like to worship today. They're weird, bombastic, and so far into their own delirium that you can watch them without feeling shitty about the world afterwards. If you're a connoisseur of modern helicopter cinema, then Mission Impossible Fallout is the event of the season. Not since Black Hawk Down has the neocopterism movement asserted such a well-defined visual aesthetic, such elevated narrative and tonal language, such awesome fucking explosions. Everything a refined and learned copterhead cinephile could possibly desire finds fresh life here. There is an absurdist, Lynchian quality infused into the rhythmic weaving of two whirlybirds. There are rarefied, Brechtian attributes present in those characters left on the ground. There is a continuation of the leitmotif established in the first Mission Impossible's chopper chase finale. When read through the lens of the tenets of cinema verite, Fallout delivers a powerful indictment of those who don't actually know how to fly such a machine. And, in a move sure to receive recognition come awards season, auteur-director Christopher McQuarrie playfully inverts the male gaze by literally flipping Tom Cruise upside down in a helicopter. Whoops. Sorry, folks. Had my snobometer set too high. Still, the fact remains that if there's any Mission Impossible movie able to withstand a level of actual criticism, it's probably Fallout. Here, for the first time, Ethan Hunt is challenged to question whether he should choose to accept every mission that comes his way. Maybe those self-destructing messages are actually destructive to Ethan's self. That's already a higher level starting point for this character than any of the previous 5 films cared to put forth, content instead with wall-to-wall action and death-defying stunt work. Fallout has those things too, of course. McQuarrie throws Tom Cruise and newcomer Henry Cavill out of a plane, onto speeding motorcycles, across rooftops, into helicopters, out of helicopters, and then off a sharp cliff for good measure. In what's become the calling card of the series, much of this craziness was accomplished in camera. Aside from putting Cruise's stunt doubles and life insurance providers out of business, the effect is an actioner with more edge-of-your-seat moments than any other film so far this year. Admittedly, it's rare that an action movie has any of those moments at all. When shit hits the fan in a James Bond movie or in Avengers or Star Wars or any other big-budget franchise, you can be fairly certain that your protagonists aren't really in peril. That doesn't mean those movies can't be entertaining, but it does mean that we sort of view Bond and Indiana Jones and comic book characters as immortal, everlasting heroes who will always keep fighting the good fight no matter what. Part of Hunt's appeal is his destructibility, his failures, and the sense that he and his supporting team are actually knocking on death's door in earnest. The fact that the actor playing Hunt is doing the same definitely helps. Fallout only falters occasionally in its plotting, which involves the remnants of Rogue Nation's evil syndicate now dubbed the Apostles and the forcible intrusion of the CIA into the IMF's affairs. For a spy film as progressive as this, and for a franchise installment with a surprising amount of youthful vigor, the disarming of a big bomb feels sort of rote as far as narrative fuel is concerned, not to mention the disarming of a big bomb as the finale of Ghost Protocol. The Apostles never really feel like a sinister force the same way the Syndicate did, and to make matters worse, Fallout very nearly manages to make returning villain Solomon Lane into a boring, ineffective bandit. His motivation and the motivation of the mysterious John Lark amount to an oft-repeated phrase, the greater the suffering, the greater the peace, which in turn amounts to nothing at all. When held up against the tighter efforts of Ghost Protocol and Rogue Nation, Fallout is somewhat less incisive with the plot lines it chooses to follow. Sometimes this results in a great moment of comedy, as when Hunt unwittingly leads his pursuers through an otherwise solemn funeral. Other times it results in something brand new to the Mission Impossible franchise, like Ethan's fever dreams of future death and destruction. On the flip side, sometimes negotiations with brokers meander while great characters like Simon Pegg's Benji have to wait patiently to re-enter the film. When all is said and done, though, Fallout moves quickly and has more than enough brains and brawn to forgive a rehashed plot. We'd be remiss not to focus on those action scenes for a second, if only to eventually arrive at the foregone conclusion that yes, that stunt was ridiculous, or no, I can't believe they really did that. The helicopter finale is indeed bonkers, and it's evident that Cruise is actually climbing into the thing while it's already airborne, then flying the thing in a corkscrew toward a mountain, then crashing it headlong into another copter. Okay, that last one was probably done up in post. Kudos number one actually goes to McQuarrie, who knows that getting his lead man to do all of this crazy shit won't mean anything if that reality isn't translated to the screen. If the camera's not telling the whole story, then it could just as easily be someone else flying that copter while Cruise sits in a trailer and gets his face CGI'd onto a pilot's shoulders. Instead, they did this. So here we are, 22 years after the first Mission Impossible film turned Tom Cruise into an action superstar, and this jaw-dropping series shows no signs of slowing down. This time around, Ethan Hunt, Cruise, and his team are trying to retrieve 3 plutonium cores that they lost during a botched mission. Jetting across the globe, the team have to race against the clock to stop all-out nuclear war. Fallout is one of the best action films ever made. Its pace is unrelenting from the first set piece through to the more emotional moments and a finale that has you on the edge of your seat. Tom Cruise continues to blur the line between actor and stuntman by packing in a ton of adrenaline-fueled set pieces. From the halo jump that everyone is talking about through to a chase scene over rooftops in London to dangling off a cliff in Kashmir, they are simply breathtaking. In a time where CGI is used for almost everything, It's amazing to see the commitment of Cruise, the director, and the crew to say screw that, we're going to dangle you off a cliff with one safety rope and film it. The stakes feel real as you know that Cruise is jumping between buildings with nothing but one safety cable and that you're not watching a bunch of pixels dancing round the screen. With Fallout, Christopher McQuarrie becomes the first person to direct 2 Mission Impossible films. In the previous Rogue Nation he set up the romance between Ethan and Ilsa Faust, Ferguson, created the villain Solomon Lane, Harris, added lots of allies and started building the foundations for the sequel. With Fallout he doesn't drop a single plot thread and ups the tension to 11. Fallout feels like the culmination of Hunt's journey as he has to deal with the consequences to his actions over all the films. There's a nice subtle call back to the first installment, and Hunt's relationship with his ex-wife, Monahan, is explored as well. Somehow, McQuarrie has made Fallout feel like the most impossible mission Ethan has had so far, and does so with slick direction and a terrific cast. At the helm, Cruise is phenomenal as Ethan Hunt, and in Fallout he gets to do equal amounts of emotional acting, mixed with his penchant for pushing his body to the limits. Back again to support him is Benji, Peg, Luther, Rhames, Ilsa, Ferguson, and a few familiar faces. New to the team is August Walker, Cavill, who makes an impact on the film in numerous ways. His giant physical presence compared to Cruise's small frame is an interesting juxtaposition, and their various fights throughout are electrifying to watch. The chemistry between the entire cast is flawless, and it feels like they've been working together for years. Gone are the replaceable supporting characters from the first 3 installments, with the exception of Benji and Luther, and instead we get characters who are fully formed and who we care about. As with all Mission Impossible films, the plot is a bit convoluted, but not to the extent that you can't follow it. Fallout is what an action film should be: great characters who you can relate to and action sequences that make you care and make you want more. Fallout could be the last in the Mission Impossible franchise, but if at age 56 Cruise is still happy to jump out of planes and break his ankle jumping from a building, then I'm more than happy to see the next installment. Since the beginning, the Mission Impossible movies have always been a showcase for Tom Cruise doing insane stunts for our amusement. And God bless the crazy little Scientology monster for that. I've said many times that if he can die, and I'm not sure he can, he's going to die doing one of these movies, and I find a certain nobility in people putting themselves in harm's way to entertain me. The last few chapters, however, has been a constant escalation in this regard as the franchise frontman pushes further and further the bounds of sanity and insurance coverage with each successive stunt. And Mission Impossible Fallout takes things to a whole new stratosphere. Literally in one case. We all remember him dangling off a plane and holding his breath for 6 minutes last time out in Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. That's all well and good, but it's kind of kid stuff compared to what he did for Fallout. Not only does he do most of his own stunts when it comes to zipping around European cities at breakneck speed on a motorcycle, handle the bulk of the fighting, and snap his own ankle leaping from roof to roof. That's not enough. He learned to fly a helicopter for a major action centerpiece just so we can see it's obviously him by himself during the shots. As if that doesn't obliterate the limits, he also jumped out of a plane 106 times to film a Halo high-altitude, low opening sequence. This includes multiple actual Halo jumps, which means he jumped out of a perfectly good airplane at more than 25,000 feet with an oxygen mask and reached speeds of more than 200 miles per hour. Multiple times. Just to make us gawk. And it works. I don't mean to go on and on about Tom Cruise, though I do maintain he's the last true movie star we have left, but all of this accomplishes something important for the film. It gives the action in Fallout, and the other Mission Impossible movies, an edge, a sense of actual danger. We watch him actually do these things. Though we know, rationally, he's as safe as possible, it's still him doing all these insane things. When he barrels through Paris, that's him. Same when he dangles off a building or cliff. It sells the action and gives it a visceral quality that so many action movies lack. Even when the film employs digital effects, they use state-of-the-art technology that blends seamlessly with the practical work. I've seen Fallout compared to Mad Max, Fury Road, and while the action never quite hits those ludicrous highs, I still have no clue how everyone didn't die filming that. It's as close as anything has come, or probably will, for a long time as usual, and as it should be. The plot serves as a delivery system for the action. The impossible mission force of Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise, Benji Dunn, Simon Pegg, and Luther Stickle, Ving Rhames, is back at it, trying to recover stolen plutonium from a self-stylized global apocalyptic terrorist death cult called the Apostles. Tagging along, they have CIA agent/wet work specialist August Walker, Henry Cavill, former ally/love interest Ilsa Faust, Rebecca Ferguson, pops up, and they once again tussle with international baddies Solomon Lane, Sean Harris, who has an axe to grind with this particular crew of espionage professionals. This film, directed by Christopher McQuarrie, written by Christopher McQuarrie, based on Mission: Impossible, produced by Tom Cruise, starring Tom Cruise, cinematography Rob Hardy, edited by Eddie Hamilton, music by Lorne Balfe, production companies Paramount Pictures, distributed by Paramount Pictures, release dates July 12, 2018, running time 147 minutes, country United States, language English, budget $178 to $180 million, box office $791.1 million.